Yeah, so as a precaution, we knew the 15th deadline was coming. The crews are formed and we are sequestered to base on the 14th. Thinking something's going to happen on the 15th, that's the deadline. Why not? We also know that we're in the opening hours of the air campaign. We don't know exactly where we fit, but we know we're somewhere in the opening hours. Our leadership had not gotten a lot of intel exactly when the president wanted really to start the war. Our leadership is getting us prepared for could be the worst day of our lives. We're looking at each other, realizing we weren't executed on the deadline, but at the other hand, we are the thing launching Desert Storm.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm AJ Pasciuti, a retired Marine, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, and Marine Gunner with 21 years of service, multiple combat tours, and a lifetime of lessons learned in the arena itself. On this show, I sit down with warriors from every front line to uncover what combat truly feels like and how it shapes the way we see life, each other, and ourselves. This is Combat Story.
Today on Combat Story, we're joined by Colonel Trey Morris, United States Air Force retired, a B-52 electronic warfare officer tied to a mission that sounds like fiction, until you realize it was real. In the opening hours of Desert Storm, he was part of Operation Senior Surprise, better known as Secret Squirrel, an ultra-secret, ultra-long-range strike that helped kick off the war. 7 B-52s launched out of Barksdale on a 35-hour, 14,000-mile round trip, solving problem after problem, fighting through adversity at every turn, and doing whatever it took to earn their chance to make it home. And fired 35 Calcoms, the first combat use of that missile, and one of the earliest operational uses of GPS-aided precision strike. Colonel Morris helped write that story then, and he captured it in his book, Doom 3-4. Buckle up, this story is the stuff of legends. This is Combat Story. Welcome back to Combat Story, everyone. My name is AJ Pasciuti, and I'm here with my new friend, retired Air Force Colonel Trey Morris, who is now, because of a couple of weather updates, right? And we have a nor'easter, right? That's happening, I think, that's kind of decimating some of the United States. We couldn't do an in-person interview, but given the advantages of technology, we have him here still in studio and able to have a great conversation. So with that, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much, AJ. I so much appreciate you having me. And yeah, that was a big disappointment. I was so looking forward to traveling yesterday, being in your studio at this very moment. But man, I just couldn't leave my wife here to deal with the storm. Luckily, as you can tell, we still have internet, so that means power and the lights in here in my setup. So we're grateful for that. But hopefully, we'll make it through the next 2 hours before that happens.
Yes, sir.
Looking at about inches of ice accumulating here in Northwest Louisiana, so holding our breath.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited to have the conversation. I know that we had to kind of do a an audible through this thing, but as one of the chapter titles of your book, there was the best laid plans. Get laid, right? And so, as we understand, it is we can plan everything in a bubble, but sometimes things just work out the way they do. But we have a term in the Marines. We say "semper gumby" is our term. So with that, I've had the opportunity to read through your book, and again, Doom 3-4 is the book here. You can see I have a lot of fun with pilots because our brains work differently sometimes, or people in the aviation industry very much work differently in a lot of ways. I've interviewed a few pilots before, and I've even vacationed with pilots before in the past, and they're very very meticulous, very drawn out, like what goes here, the next, I would say sequential in how they manage things. I put sticky notes everywhere. So I, as kind of a ground pounder, have a different kind of operating system in my brain, and it's always fun to be able to kind of go through and have really fun conversations. So with that, I really want to talk about your journey of service. I know that in the beginning of your book, I really enjoyed the aspect of how you started almost with the end, right? You started with this idea of everyone coming together and kind of celebrating this incredible mission that you guys were on. What was the genesis of you joining the military? Where are you from? What did that look like to you? And what was your kind of upbringing? Did you have a pathway that led you to service?
Oh, absolutely, and love to talk about that. So I grew up in Northwest Arkansas, little town called Springdale, and I'll talk a little bit about what makes you Northwest Arkansas unique, other than it's just a great place to live. But uh, my family motivators, my family, I had a great uncle that was a gunner on a B-17 in World War II. A grandfather that flew B-24s also in World War II, and later B-29s. And then around the Vietnam War era and on, I had an uncle in the Army and an uncle that was a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. So I had all these influences. My father sadly didn't have the eyesight to be in the military. He was a National Guardsman earlier in his life, kind of during the Cuban Missile Crisis phase. So I did have these influencers, and I really fell in love with the idea of flying. And you notice I picked that word idea, and we can come back to that later why I picked that word. But I had my grandfather was a Distinguished Flying Cross recipient.
Wow.
Flew in the famous Biloxi oil field raids, and then later was an instructor pilot on B-29 and the initial cadre to get the B-29 out the door and in the Pacific region. So really a lot of really cool influences. Um, I mentioned my uncle. Sadly, he was lost on his very first mission
Oh, whoa. Oh,
in
no.
1943. But he also, again, a mighty Eighth Air Force member. You can find his name on many of the memorials in the United Kingdom. When you go through some of the museums there, it's quite sad and a somber moment when I found his name on there the first time. So again, I had these influences growing up. Northwest Arkansas, a great place, and you touched on values, and so my great grandparents lived in Bentonville, which is still the home of Walmart, and it wasn't uncommon for Sam Walton to have lunch after church at my great grandparents' house, and even
Oh,
as a child, 5-year old, 6-year old, spending the summer with my great grandparents, I can still remember having lunch after church lunch with Sam Walton. So it's kind of
wow.
a neat experience. My father was great friends and a high school classmate of John Tyson, Tyson Foods, also still headquartered right there in Springdale, Arkansas. JB Hunt, also a Fortune 200 company. My father was good friends with the Hunts, and not so much from an entitlement perspective, but that's just he just grew up in that time period when these people he went to high school with. So it's interesting that you have all of this industry and corporate headquarters there in Northwest Arkansas where I grew up, and people don't realize that again the largest company in the world is headquartered just about 5 miles north of where I grew up. And then again, the one of the largest food producers in the world, headquartered in my hometown. So I say that with pride because it was really a neat place to grow up. My sister still lives there. I have 2 sisters that still live there and a niece and love going back there. But, that kinda covers what it looked like growing up. A middle child, I had an older sister who's a police officer,
Oh, wow.
and then my younger sister is a nurse. So we had this mentality of kind of public service
Yeah.
sort of jobs. And my father was a journalist for the local newspaper there, and my mother was a real estate agent. So um, again, very service oriented type careers, and so that's just the way I grew up. And my grandmother, um, a product out of World War II,
Mhm.
lost her husband and to um, an illness, and she kept the local family auto parts store running on her own. So here's a woman running an auto parts store for all those years.
Oh, I
Again, I
love
had a
that.
viewpoint of, and I talk about that in the book a lot, and I bring that up, and even the crew of Doom 34, I kind of bring you through a little bit of what their childhoods were like. So it's not just a historical account. It really I try my best to write it in a little bit of a novel form, introducing the crew as characters and giving you some background of how they grew up and a little bit more about me since it's told mainly through my eyes.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I loved how it was able to carry through, and so it wasn't necessarily disjointed. You didn't have to say like in the beginning of this is like, here's the list of characters. You're going to have to remember them all the way through. You kind of helped to sprinkle a little bit about them as they were introduced through that. And it really helped build almost a bond, So these are people that I don't know and haven't met,
Yeah.
but I'm still able to build a bond with them as I go through the book. And then get to, there's a little bit of, it's almost like, God, how do I describe it? When you're trying to, so, as you mentioned, on our pre-call, right? So I've written my own book, right? I'm going through that process. The hardest part that I found with writing the book, and I noticed that we had a lot of similarities in this was you have like one paragraph to basically write someone's entire life story into
Yep.
one paragraph and
Mhm.
try to talk about the impact that they had on your life. And it feels, you don't want it to feel rushed, but you also need to get to the story and you want to give these people, tell them, the world how much these people influenced you and how great they were impacting your life. And it resonated as I read through this, and I found myself chuckling a few times as I was like, "Man, I know what he's doing right here, and I love it." As I went through it. So, what drew you to the Air Force, and I don't know, maybe not the Marines? Is my burning question.
So, what drew me to the Air Force again was that heritage that I found it right there in my own family. And now earlier I mentioned to you that I've fell in love with the idea of flying. And so I wanted to come back to that real quick and then wrap that around the answer to your question, AJ. So I go to the recruiter. I've decided I want to be a pilot. And so I'm going to I'm working through the process to get to build the package and all the paperwork that's associated with that to go to a board to see if I can be selected for a pilot slot.
Mhm.
In the book, you'll know that I'm an electronic warfare officer, which is really a specialized navigator in the Air Force. So in the end, you'll know that I went to navigator school, but I started off trying to be a pilot, and again fell in love with the idea of pilot training. And so I go to the local airport there in Fayetteville, Arkansas to get on an airplane to go down to Little Rock, Arkansas to take my physical. That's the first time I've ever flown in an airplane.
Oh, okay. I gotta know more. This is so you
So
had this almost like boyish dream of flying, but had never actually done it.
never been in an airplane.
Oh,
I've
wow.
I mean, as far I've been in a ground airplane, and and as a boy, especially one that's engineering minded,
Yeah.
you fall in love with the switches and the gauges, right? You do. Much like back in the day when stereos were a big thing. You fall in love with having your stereo, put it in the racks and all that. It's all the switchology and the gadgetry that you fall in love with. So that was part of it. And then, just the freedom and the thought of flying. So, um, yeah, I mean, the flight from Fayetteville to Little Rock down there was uneventful. But I tell you, coming home, it was a thunderstorm dodger. Well, by this time, I've really already signed the paperwork. All I have to do is successfully clear the physical, and I'm in. So I tell you, I began to question my very much my life choice at this point because it's turbulent and it's just not fun when it's turbulent, right?
Sure.
And you're in a place of no control, flying in the back of this commuter airplane, which was turboprops at the time, and so and you get the picture. So my second time to be in an airplane, I decided I didn't want to fly, but at this point, I'm gonna drive through and press through and gut it out. And glad I did because man, what a ride! And so that's kind of the story that brought me into the Air Force. Now, again, it was this love of the gadgetry, and I wanted to serve. And through that process, I did consider the Navy and the Marines. Now, the Marine Corps, you don't know that you're gonna get a chance to be a pilot or navigator.
Right.
You know that. You have to be an infantryman first,
Right, right.
which if your focus is to fly, you're rolling the dice a little bit here.
Yeah, the Marines aren't known for being the most, our advertising campaigns are second to none. However, when people are, like, lock set on doing something, I actually think it's kind of a bit, we do now have sometimes, like, flight contracts, but those are heavily predicated on performance as they kind of
Mhm.
go through it. and it's like I can totally get that, right? It's
Yeah,
like you're like,
highly, very competitive. You get guys that have master's degrees and private pilot license already, and I didn't. Yeah, I had a 2.5 grade point average, and I was a scholar athlete, and so yeah, I knew my place.
I love that. I love that. So, I know that before we get to the book, I know that you had a statement that you wanted to read because you still are still serving the government in some capacity. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to read that here.
Yeah, thank you for reminding that. Even though I did retire a few years ago and hung up the uniform, I returned sometime later as a government service employee. I'm director of staff, currently the director of staff for the mighty 8th Air Force, directly for the commander, um, the highest ranking civilian in all of the 8th Air Force is kind of my little bragging rights. But great place to be. I mean, that's where I served and supported my entire military career, and here I am with them again. So I will read this. So apologize to your viewers, but the views expressed are those of the author and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Department of War or the United States Air Force. So I'm required to talk about that. Let's get rid of that and throw that aside, and let's keep having fun.
Awesome. I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm excited. So, okay. So we're going to kind of start off a little somber here because I thought the way that you started the book was actually very touching to me. Um, and if I may, all of this is, and I want to implore all of the listeners to be able to read this book. I think it's actually quite fascinating to kind of go through this. What is the term? Can you describe the scenario behind it? But what is the term "gone west" was new to me when I was reading this, and I thought it was really really touching when I went through that portion. Can you describe a little bit about what that history is and kind of what your how you brought that up in the book?
So yeah, so I think we're talking about the prologue,
Yes, sir.
and I don't know if it's unique to flyers or um, people that navigate the world. It could be from the Navy even, but it is a term that we actually use and inherited from our famous Doolittle Raiders from the 1942 that, as we know, did a strike against Japan off the deck of an aircraft carrier. Quite legendary, and I can talk more about that in a little while. But a lot of what we started doing that I wrote about in the prologue was our first real organized reunion, our 25th reunion. And the term, AJ, you talk about is really um, a somber and respectful way to recognize those of our group that have already passed away. And so as we do a roll call where we actually call through every one of the Doom aircraft, Doom 31 through Doom 37. If you happen to be an aircraft that hasn't lost anybody, then the response is, "Sir, all accounted for." But then if you don't have somebody that's somebody that has passed, we recite that person's name and we end it with "Gone West." So on Doom 34, Michael Branch, Captain Michael Branch was the first of our 57 airmen to pass away in late 1992 of cancer. And so during this roll call, we also mirror the heritage of the Doolittle Raiders, where we toast them with scotch.
I think you called it "Nectar of the Gods" at one point.
And and that may be a little bit overwritten there, but I don't. Maybe I don't think so. It's very applicable right there, and so back to the Doolittle Raiders really quickly. I mean, every time I talk about Senior Surprise and the name of this mission, and it's been nicknamed Secret Squirrel, and we'll talk about that some more too. And put us in the same paragraph with the Doolittle Raiders, it doesn't set well with me because of the tremendous sacrifice and danger of that mission compared to our mission. And other people will debate me on that one. And it's easy to say when you all come home safely to say, well, yours wasn't as dangerous. Well, who knows? But I'll counter with the last from the 25th anniversary to the last to the 29th anniversary. Um, we were lashed up tight with Dick Cole, who was Jimmy Doolittle's co-pilot,
Oh, wow.
and he did our reunions with us. And before he passed away, he literally passed the baton to us and asked us to keep the heritage going, to combine his heritage of the Doolittle Raiders with those of us with the Secret Squirrel and Senior Surprise. So I remind people that we don't do it casually, we don't do it flippantly, and we honor that connection because again, Dick Cole, um, I'll say it this way, just provided gave us the permission to do so.
I love that. I mean, I love that. So part of one of the things that I don't know that a lot of people who haven't served in the military understand is the lineage. Is this under like when you for Marines, it's like stepping on the yellow footprints at boot camp, right?
Mhm.
Or there's, I mean, even the paddle that I have behind me, that comes from a reconnaissance tradition from World War II. And so all of these things,
Yeah.
they tie us to this brotherhood and this bond of the people that have gone before. One of the things that I think, when things get tough and when things get super, when the wheels start coming off of a mission, right? I think
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of what held me together was I don't want to be the one to let this lineage down, and it's this almost like this silent promise to yourself to not be able to, to want to carry on the legacy of the call sign or the history or the lineage itself. I love that. I mean, yeah, reading through this, the Doolittle raids were, very unique to their time, in the history that I know about them. And so was Doom 3-4's mission or this, I would say, Secret Surprise's mission itself. I mean, it's just riveting to be able to kind of go through and see how cutting edge both were. There's a ton of there's a ton of
Oh, yeah.
parallels.
Yeah, the innovation part of it, you're right, is equally there, with the taking off from the deck of an aircraft carrier. I mean, who thought of that?
What crazy person decided that that
Yeah,
was a good idea?
and again, with the uniqueness of the one of the main characters in my book, Doom 3-4, is the top secret weapon,
Yeah.
the conventional air launched cruise missile, which we call the Calcum.
Calcum. I wanted to know the pronunciation of that because
Yeah.
we all swim in acronyms, right? But there's like I wanted it because there's we always turn an acronym into some sort of, noun, right? Uh,
We call it the Calc. Matter of fact, I'm working through a whole list of acronyms right now that my voice actor sent me just a few hours ago that he's recording my audiobook.
Mhm.
And I guess they didn't want the Southern twang of
Are you kidding me? Lit I
no.
I would prefer it. It would it you I when we talked on the phone before the interview itself, I was like, "Man, this guy's got the sweetest voice." You're like, I wanna have you if maybe you and Neil deGrasse Tyson, I want you guys reading astrophysics to me as I fall asleep at night because it is so calming and
That
so
would be
soothing.
good. Yeah. Well, I joke first time author. It's just the way it is. I was not hurt at all, but yes, we call that the Calcum.
The Calcum, really, really cool. Really, really cool. Okay, so this will be interesting because as we kind of go through this, I will try to compare this from you added a whole bunch of color to a time frame of where I wasn't. Um, our age difference has a little bit to do with the story. I wasn't super aware of a lot of the things that were happening behind the scenes. I was
Mhm.
very young when this all happened, so this was really, really cool to kind of see the similarities that I saw with my career and the timelines and the things that happened were very much happening the same way, 20 years earlier, which was really, really cool to see. So, can you take us through a little bit of the history of Saddam Hussein and his incursion, right, or the invasion of Kuwait and where we stood, kind of geopolitically at that? You do a very good job of narrating that through the book. And I want, for our viewers as well to kind of go down that pathway if you could.
Yeah, and thank you for saying about the complimenting the way I wrote it because that was a big struggle for me to not dive too far into the historical the boring historical facts of it. It could become boring, but it gives a little bit of context for the reader, as you said, that maybe didn't live through that period, and they kind of have to understand the motivations of Saddam Hussein in 1991. We know Saddam stayed in power all the way through 2003 during a different conflict. But going back to 91, we have to understand at this point in geopolitically, the Iraqis and Iranians had just completed I think it was about an 8-year war that pretty much devastated both countries. Now, between the two, Iraq emerged in a little bit better shape than the Iranians, but both of them were in terrible shape. But still, the Iraqis were known to have the fifth largest army in the world at the time.
Yeah, that was new to me. I mean, I knew they had a formidable army, but I didn't know it was the 5th at the time. That was fascinating.
And Russians, and at the time Soviet, I guess we should say, the Soviet, all pretty much all Soviet equipped, and strong partners with the Soviets because of the oil in the region and so forth. And so at this point, the Soviet Union hadn't really started their oil production as we see it today. They were
Mm,
much dependent on a lot of their neighbors around there,
okay.
and Iraq was one of them. Also in that region, we see that the Saudis had not really built up any kind of defensive forces yet, neither had the Jordanians. So there was a lot of unbalance, if you will, militarily in that region, with Iraq being really the number one power. So also they're almost bankrupt. They've borrowed a lot of money. They owe the Soviets a lot in exchange for weaponry and not paying for it, that kind of thing. So they're owed a lot of money. So there's this motivation that they need to sell oil, and they would really like to not have to pay the Kuwaitis back for the money that they borrowed from them.
That was one of the most interesting facets of it. I didn't know that, like, that they had effectively borrowed money from Kuwait to be able to fund their war against Iran, and I'm assuming this was probably Sunni Shia related. I'm sure the that was my assumption, was that I don't know the geopolitics of the region at the time, but I felt that there was kind of an inkling of that, of a Shia majority, and having to be able I didn't that was kind of my space that I thought of that, and so when they effectively defaulted on their loans or asked for
Mhm.
forgiveness,
Yeah.
it always comes back to the idea of money and resources to me, and I saw that kind of
Mhm.
playing through, and I was like, "Hmm."
And so that's kind of where we were now. There were to me unsubstantiated reports of the Kuwaitis doing slant drilling into Iraq and basically stealing oil. To me, that's a debatable point, but I wrote it from a perspective really. Those other two I'm sorry, those other three are really factual. They were in ruins from the war. They owed a lot of money. They needed a way to sell more oil. Their access to the Gulf was very limited, where the Kuwaitis have a little bit more of an access to the Gulf, and so you can see it's all about distribution at this point.
Absolutely, almost a tale as old as time, right? As you're
Yeah.
seeing these things, as you're seeing, like, money and resources and access to ports, are really the 3 things that I've seen throughout any kind of military history. I was like, "Okay, now I'm not justifying Saddam Hussein's invasion by any means, but I could see from his perspective, why he was looking to do this, right? He was kind of backed, not again, by no means defending, right? But almost like backed into a wall, right? Or into a corner that he needed to kind of fight out of it to stay in power, is what it looked like.
Oh, yeah, and then we also see again the close partnership between Iraq and the Soviet Union at the time. And let's remember the Soviet Union hadn't fallen yet. That was later in that year, and early 1992 is when we finally see the last bit of the crumbling of the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
And that's really a lot of the fear that occurred at the time of after August 2nd, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, really in a bold and surprise move, and overwhelmed the Kuwaitis in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
So, no military in the region to really push back any kind of Iraqi advancement if they decided to go west. You have this two superpowers, the Soviets back in Iraq, and the United States really back in freedom-loving countries at this point. So you almost had this powder keg of superpowers on one end of the scale, and then Saddam in Iraq really could take control of a large portion of the world's energy reserves by moving into Saudi Arabia, which again did not have a military worthy of the Iraqi army.
I was
So,
really surprised by the international response. That was something that was from my war to the comparison with Iraq in 1991 was that seemed like there was what 47 is what I read in the book. I think it was 47 coalition forces came together. So this was globally, it seemed like it was much more supported, I think, from, an international scale of being able to defend Kuwait itself. And I really I enjoyed the seeing the differences between the 2 and how everyone really came together.
yeah, absolutely, and I didn't fill in a lot of gaps in the book, but I did talk about the more of the UN resolutions towards the end of 1990 that came about that to kind of support what you said. Not only did we create a coalition of the willing, but the UN was creating multiple resolutions with the ultimate one of January 15th, 1991 was the deadline that they implemented through the UN resolution that if Saddam didn't leave Kuwait, the UN sanctioned military response to move him out.
It seemed very, almost lockstep, was like, we're going to, the international response and the United States' response at the time seemed very, I thought it was very calculated as I was kind of learning about this going through. It was like, "Hey, we're going to sanction you. We're going to try to, diplomacy." And then eventually we're setting a deadline of like, "Yo, dude, like we're not messing around." Right. And
Absolutely, yeah. And in the meantime, again, respecting the size of his army and the weaponry through a lot, chemical weapons and so forth, it took that long really to do the proper military buildup in the region with the coalition partners that you just mentioned.
yeah, I was it was really fascinating to read that. So let's take a step back for a second. And so I really enjoyed this is something I've interviewed I haven't interviewed any fast movers yet. I've interviewed helicopter pilots and but I you mentioned inside of this first of all there's a couple funny lines that I picked out of here. But one of the questions I had, what are the different cultures inside of the Air Force? Because you mentioned bomber culture specifically. And then there's one word that really stuck out to me was cannibalism. Can you talk through that portion first? Because I was laughing out loud reading that section, but then also talk about the different cultures between the Air Force itself.
Yeah, so I did go into some depth in the tribes within the Air Force, and it really tied back to the mission that you perform. And I'm sure you had the same kind of tribalism in the Marines even.
No, no, no. Yeah.
Yeah, and then even when we look at, Army soldiers versus Marine infantrymen, there's a this huge disparity there too. But anyway, the cannibalism, I think the part you're talking about was I described some of um, the humorous and my dad would call it jocularity, all the things that go along, in the background within the bomber community. And so what we're talking about here is, and the American public might be shocked to hear this is happening during the time that we are, as a country, working within feet of nuclear weapons,
Oh, sure.
right? But part of what we did is in this particular scenario is you have to there's a lot of pressure on this zero fail mission, and that's really what it was, and I hope the American public can appreciate that it's a zero fail mission when you're around nuclear weapons and you're performing the nuclear deterrent mission.
Mhm.
And there in 1991, we were actually in the final months of the historical period of the United States where we had B-52 bombers sitting loaded with nuclear weapons 24/7, 365, and the air crew and the maintainers and the security forces also sequestered to base, living within feet of these aircraft, ready to do the nation's business of our worst day ever if that ever happened. And we know that hadn't yet, and hopefully it never will. Um, but with all that pressure, there's a lot of ways that we would use humor and a lot of dark humor
Yeah, can't like gallows humor. I've always kind of
to relieve the pressure. So when you had a brand new navigator or pilot who came to the unit, And usually when, again, this thing we call pulling alert, what I mentioned is you're confined to the base 1 week out of a month. And you eat, drink, sleep in an alert facility again, just within feet of these airplanes that we call, they're parked on what we call the Christmas tree.
Okay.
And it's just a ramp that has different parking spots angled into a large taxiway that then takes you out to the airfield for takeoff. And from the air, it looks like a Christmas tree.
Okay.
And so you're living in this facility with a cafeteria and it's a dorm-like facility, a briefing room, and so forth. Well, we convince our new airmen that they need to sign a release form that looks very official, has a proper letterhead on it. Usually, commanders is involved somewhere in the joke because it's just a standard thing we do. And this is a release statement that, in case of a mission and you crash, you are giving the permission for your other aircrew member to eat your body for fuel, for sustenance, for food. And so we go through this entire process, and this is back in the day. You remember when we had in school, you had the overhead projectors. We don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
at this point. So you get the form signed, you turn it into a slide, and then you appropriately put it up on the next day's morning brief to show everybody that we got one more.
Another new guy bites the dust.
Yeah.
We had a couple in the Marines, so we had there was with one the running joke was like looking for the Humvee keys. And so all of our Humvees are just a turn knob to start, right? And so we'd send the new guy like, go find the Humvee keys, right? They run around. One of my favorites, which was especially reserved for very overzealous young men and women, was so. I mean, you obviously know the radios and everything because we were talking in the book. You mentioned VHF and UHF, but we have so they're. I don't know what the acronym actually stands for, to be quite honest, but the PRC 117 or the PRC 119 is a common radio that we use, and so we just call it the Prick 19 or the Prick 117 or whatever it is.
Yep.
And so we would have a young Marine, and we would say, "Hey, go to Gunny, right, the E7, and ask him for a Prick E7." And so we would, so he would like show up to this gunnery sergeant, like, gunnery sergeant, I'm looking for a Prick E7. And he would, he'd just get like roasted, right, ripped apart. But everybody was kind of in on it, he was over the top, right, because that was the point, right, to, kind of go through there. But so let's walk through the differences in the bomber community versus any of like, again, rotor wing and like your jet community. Well, you guys are technically jets, but your fighter community, excuse me.
I mean, so tanker transport is your KC-135s at the time, your KC-10s, and you're well aware of the transport, the C5 and the C-130s.
I jumped out of those, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. And so they all had their kind of their own tribal community on the way they wear the uniform. It used to be known that you could pick out a C5 guy because he'd have like a spoon in his pocket right here, right? Flight suit unzipped down to his belly button, which usually had a lot of weight to it. But so there's kind of these tribal markers. It was always interesting to me that the pilots in the fighter world don't say they're just a pilot. They always say, well, I'm a fighter pilot. They always put fighter in there to make sure you understand there's a right? And I'm a fighter pilot.
Yeah, right.
And in the bomber world, and the reason I really brought up a lot of this tribal part was to help people understand how the DNA at the time of the B-52 community was all about this nuclear deterrence piece. And again, this no-fail mission. And very checklist driven, and the oldness of the airplane, and even the oldness of the weaponry required a certain type of innovation and nuance to the job.
Mm-hmm.
But again, a lot of it I was really trying to stress in the book how this is a zero fail mission, because that helps people understand partly why we got through this mission, this 35-hour record-setting mission, when things were happening, failure happening like every hour, something happening. that could have something occurred that was either affecting the mission or really threaten life and limb.
I think that it's the tie-in, right?
Mhm.
Again, each
Yeah.
individual community has their own thing that really, I don't know, it's like a shared bond. And so most of the times that shared bond comes from a shared suffering of some sort. I am on the Barksdale Air Force Base's webpage right now. And one of their new pieces is the B-52 comfort seating inbound. So that's a new development that, that I'm sure a little better than the lawn chairs that I read about
Yeah.
in here, right? As you've gone through it. I mean, that's fantastic, right? And it's a way for the it's tough. It's tough for people to when you talk about, I'm a fighter pilot, right?
Mhm.
Versus, and then the C5 with the spoon. We don't hate each other, right? We just kind of like jab at each other. It's always come from a place of respect and like, oh, okay, flyboy, right? Or, we joke about like for us is I always, like in the Marines, it's always that Top Gun line where it's like, I'm a naval aviator, right? We're like, oh yeah. Neat.
Yeah, yeah.
We always laughed at that and had a good time with that. I
Yeah.
always joke with my pilot friends, because inadvertently, I don't know if this is true in the Air Force, but inadvertently, pilots are like Italians, is how I like to say it, is they talk with their hands. And oftentimes when a pilot is talking about something, he's chasing his watch, right? So
Mhm.
he's got his watch flying around and I'm like, okay, watch chaser, right? It's like,
And it's the truth. It is the truth, especially when you're talking to the fire pilot guys. Now, it happens also, I think just about any pilot.
yeah.
And I'm terrible even today, in my office having a meeting with somebody and I'm pointing to a location on the building, or on the base where a building is. And I'll be going, "Those people over there," and they're like, "What are you
Right.
doing?"
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
even today.
It's
Yeah.
just old habits die
It
hard. I
is.
totally get that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so all of this is now let's go back to, 1990, early 1991. The Calcum, I know you mentioned the book that you were not on the initial conversations
Yep.
of this thing. You knew of it, but you knew something was kind of going on. But what I really found interesting was, can you describe to me the feeling of being in the waiting rooms, knowing that something was happening and the call was kind of sitting there? You mentioned specifically what I wrote here was so cool underneath it. Can you describe what a 6-ring alert is? Because I think that speaks to the specific time,
Yeah.
and technology at the time, but also, like, when I read that, I was like, "My god," right? That's a big ask.
So that even happens when we're doing the nuclear job sometimes. But what happened in this time period is, again, the Calcum still was a test, the weapon's still in test. It was not even considered operational yet. And, I mentioned earlier, there was nothing really in the region to stop or even blunt Saddam Hussein if he decided to move west after the invasion. And so that's why quickly this Calcum was brought into service. And every missile that was made at that time, Boeing was the prime contractor on that weapon, by the way,
Mhm.
was loaded on an airplane. Crews that had no idea this capability even existed were all called in and briefed in. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, all the scariness, the video showing you how accurate this weapon is. And
That was a
yeah,
fun part, to read was, like,
yeah,
what we would assume now is, we've kinda my generation kinda grew up with, like, watching precision guided munitions,
yeah.
but what was it like so we'll derail for 1 second. What was it like sitting in the room, again, in the vault at the time and watching this weapon system's capabilities?
Oh, I talk about it in the book in detail, and that was one area that I spent a lot of time thinking and trying to figure out the right words that I needed to describe that. But the thought was, is at this point, I know something's up. We're months into to this process of doing the 6-ring alert, which, oh yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. Crews being on alert. I'm doing my own job, but we realize now it's time for me to be read in, if you will, into the program. And all I know is there's airplanes that are out there parked on the runway that have a weapon on it that looks just like a nuclear weapon,
Okay.
right? So the Calcum is just a retrofitted Alcum. An Outcome is still in service today, and that's our nuclear capable standoff cruise missile. We still use
Okay.
that today, but you can't really tell the two apart. So it looks like we've got 5, 6, 7 aircraft loaded, yes, over and above the other ones that are on alert, which we're used to. Well, yes, you can imagine to the layman, you think, why do we have 7 extra aircraft loaded with more nuclear weapons?
Yeah, I don't do math in public, but why do we have 35, nuclear warheads, additional nuclear warheads sitting like, what do I
So
not know?
so I have no idea what I'm about to see. All I know is by this time I've already signed a non-disclosure agreement. Um, they basically didn't say a word about what I was about to see. They just said, "All right, we'll start off with this video." And again, you kinda got this guy who's done this probably hundreds of times by now.
Yeah.
So he's not too impressed anymore. So I'm just watching this grainy video, and it's in real time speed, and all of a sudden there's sounds, so you can kind of hear the wind blowing. It's in a Utah test range, so the wind in the background you can sort of, and a little bit of dust rolling by as the wind's blowing, and all of a sudden there's this screech and an explosion, and this concrete block that was in the middle of the screen just evaporates. And before you can kind of even perceive what you just saw, now it goes through a slow motion version of it. And then the dude kind of walks over and hits the pause and goes, "All right, here's the deal is we got a conventional version." And now he has to describe to me what GPS is,
Yeah.
right? So that's common to us, right? We don't even go across the town, even though you know how to get to the doctor's office. We put it in anyway because we know that our iPhone or our Google phone is going to help us figure out the best way to get there versus the traffic. So we don't do anything today without GPS. But at this time, what's GPS?
Correct. So I've got 300 questions about that, right? Because I'm so excited as a guy who at times I prefer what we now have to call analog navigation, right? you know,
Yeah.
I like doing that because I think that there's a little bit of mission planning tied into that. There's a little bit of professionalism tied into that, attention to
Mhm.
detail. I think that reinforces a whole bunch. And then the integration of GPS. I very much want to talk about that. But first of all, the 6 ring alert. I really
Yeah.
want to talk that. That was such a fun moment for me in the book that I think was really, really important to kind of neck down on.
So again, we're talking about, so the invasion happened in August. So now we're in around the September, October timeframe. We've loaded the weapons. Um, the president George W. Bush understands there's an option now for him on the table if he needs it. So to ensure that if there's a time he says, "I need you to go now," or again, the enemy gets a vote, right?
Yeah.
So let's say Saddam says, "I'm going west," and we need to respond immediately. The only thing that can get there now, at this time, we've built up some forces in the region. There's a couple fighter units in there with fighter pilots. We don't forget those guys, right?
Fighter pilot.
You know, fighter pilot. We're there, but it's still not enough. So in order to be able to respond quickly, we send people home and we put them in what we call this thing called 6 ring alert, which means you are home. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You have to be by the phone, no cell phones at this time either. And you are expected to answer that phone before it rings 6 times.
And what
And
happens if it goes to 7?
well, nothing. You get called back again. Right there. Why'd you answer the phone? And yeah, so we had roughly 32 air crew members at the time, probably, or 40 sent home with the expectation that if Saddam continues west, we're going to call you and you're going to go fly a mission. And same thing on the maintenance side. We got maintainers that are home, ready to come launch aircraft. We've got um, all the pilots and the navigators and the crew members and the support people at home waiting for a phone call if they have to. So we did this for a couple of months.
Wow. That's fascinating to do. That was something that was really, really, what's so great about, running this podcast is I get to find out and live an experience of so many other different people's lives. And so when I was reading that and going through that process of the 6 rings, that sat with me a little different, right? Was because now it's not just a job, it's impacting the totality of your life, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
And again, this is a special access program, so we're not allowed to say anything about the program. Even the name is classified. Senior Surprise, you're not even allowed to even use that. It's an unacknowledged program. So your spouse is asking you, why are you home? Why you been home for days and you can't go to work?"
are you in trouble? Right? You know?
And so we kinda use the story of the nuclear mission, because that has happened in where we've done an exercise where you're sent home to exercise the home alert thing, if you will, and so that's happened some, and so it was a story that worked okay for a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But eventually people start asking a little bit more questions.
Yeah, yeah.
What were those conversations like when GPS was first being introduced? So, one, it sounds like they're introducing this new weapon system,
Mhm.
and they're saying, "Hey, it's also GPS guided." And so, what was the feeling in the room, especially with your background, on being able to trust this weapon system, the accuracy, it seemed like it was ushering in like this new revolutionary technology that
Yeah,
you guys had really prepared for. What was that kind of conversation like, especially with this tech that was kind of showing you the videos?
absolutely. So the constellation that we enjoy today that gives accuracy down to inches was only a few satellites at this time. So the accuracy was limited, and there were only certain times during the day that you were going to get GPS satellite coverage over that area of the world.
Oh,
'Cause
wow.
remember, these are not geosynchronous satellites that just sit there. They still
Mhm.
orbit the Earth, and so that was a component that we had kind of had to wrap our brain around. And again, you kind of alluded back to my job, and so we were used to understanding what from a radar perspective and a radio signal perspective, what direction finding is, or DF cuts.
Mhm.
And we use that in navigation, old school navigation.
Mhm.
There's radios out there that you can old school you can receive, and you could get navigation assistance from those. So you apply that same kind of principle to satellites sending and receiving signals down to the Earth. We could quickly comprehend what GPS, Global Positioning System, was going to do for this weapon, and how it will help it do those direction finding cuts. And I'm not doing a very good job explaining this.
No, you're good. You're fine.
So the bottom line is we were educated on how the GPS works with the signaling. We were also educated that we were the only country in the world that has this capability. And then the missile was retrofitted with these receivers so that it would be able to fly, navigate to the target within inches of accuracy. Now, we also were educated that there were failures early in this program. So by this time, the Calcum program was about 2 years in existence, and and I mentioned earlier, it was not declared operational yet. And so around the August, September timeframe, Strategic Air Command, SAC, which doesn't exist anymore, now it's Air Force Global Strike Command, they pushed the test world to do 2 tests in 1 day, and both of those weapons, those Calcum, struck their targets, uh, with inches accuracy.
So that's what I find, and again, you said it earlier where it's like the enemy gets a vote, right? So we were preparing this technology. It probably had a pretty long glide slope on when they thought it was gonna be able to come to full operational status, and then all of a sudden, Saddam drives across the Kuwaiti border, right, and is, like, threatening this huge global conflict, and everyone's like, well, let's press fast forward on this thing and get this
Yeah.
thing moving." This is what I find, like, what I d I too worked for the government for a very long time, and I understand that the wheels of government, as again you wrote in the book, turn
Mhm.
very, very slowly at times. But what I really loved to see was when everyone says, "Okay, we've got a collective mission to solve. Let's cut through the red tape and get to yes."
That is good. Yes, exactly, and that's what happened here, is you had commanders at Strategic Air Command and the Pentagon and Boeing all pushed in, leaned in to do what they could to get 2 successful tests. Now again, this weapon is not fully even integrated into the navigation system of the B-52. So there's a little bit of clunkiness that takes place to actually program it, the right targets into it, and then also execute and launch it. It's similar to the nuclear version, but there, again, there's some nuances that really make it a cumbersome weapon at the time. It's not fully integrated.
Yeah.
So we declared it good enough. I'm going to say I don't know if I use those words in the book, but it was declared good enough and continued to press in service. Boeing continued to make more, and because even at the time we talk about when we flew the mission in January, that we took every weapon we had, that was 39, with us. If you rewind a few months, there were not 39 missiles. There were less than that because again, we were taking possession as quick as these things were being.
Really?
Yes, yes.
There, I mean, that's so crazy. And knowing the size of the Air Force and the size of the, the War Department now, right? Is like to be able to have such a low density item that we like, it comes off the line and it's like shipping straight to you guys. Like we have 39 of one thing.
And at the same time, they were taking some of the very early weapons off the jet and putting in a new GPS receiver that they had been enhanced that was on the later version. So there's even modifications happening in real time on the weapons.
So you took us through, you mentioned earlier, the GPS signals and having to orbit around the Earth. What I really enjoyed, and with classification understandings, what was the planning like for this mission? Because now that I'm looking at, okay, so thinking about, this is 1990, rolling into close to 1991. We have GPSs that are not blanket coverage of the Earth. They're orbiting at specific times. That makes me think that we have to make sure that our satellites are positioned over the target area at a specific time when we're expecting bombs to hit the targets. That makes me think of all of the other back planning that had to happen in this vault to get all of the logistics, right? The 14 C-130s or KC-130s that are refueling you that then turn into C-5s, if I'm not mistaken. So can you take me through a little bit of that and what that, my God, I'm just trying to be like, how do you start with this thing and be like, okay, we're going to do this, right? We're going to like, this is unprecedented, especially at this time.
So keep in mind that again, the Calcum is just a retrofitted version of the Alchem, the nuclear mission. So a lot of the nuclear planning does not happen down at the base level, the Barksdale level. It happens at a higher headquarter level.
Okay.
Same thing was happening with the Calcum. And the programming and the route programming of how this missile will fly from the aircraft to the target, all that routing from the launch point, if you will, again to the target, would be programmed on these things we call DTUCs, and I even forget what it stands for. I talked about
No one's going to blame you. You could say anything and no one's going to know.
that DTUC, Delta Tango Uniform Charlie, and it's this cartridge that has a cavity inside the airplane, and you plug it in, and it has an old tape in it. We don't use them anymore. It's an upgraded version, and on that tape, on these tapes would be all your mission routing, takeoff to the air refueling, so forth and so on. But also there'd be specific tapes that would have the programming that talks to the missile. So as these different types of routes are changing from the time we go on that 6 ring alert in September all the way to January, some of the target priorities change daily and weekly. These cartridges I'm describing would be flown to us from Offutt Air Force Base, where SAC headquarters was, to Barksdale, sometimes daily.
So you said Moffett Air Force Base?
Offutt.
Offutt. Okay. So I was raised in Northern California, right next to Moffett.
Yeah.
Moffett Airfield is actually the reason why I joined the military. I had a friend of mine who was in the Boy Scouts. His dad was in the Air National Guard.
Okay.
And so he worked and lived on base. And so whenever I'd go spend the night at his house, we'd go like ride bikes around Moffett Airfield. And this was pre-1996 timeframe. So it was still a joint air and naval base at the time. And all of the air shows and stuff. So I fell in love with the military because of Moffett. Sorry, total side tangent, but
no, I did see it the same. So this is in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
So again, these target selections would change daily or every other day, and when you do a target selection change, It requires a routing change for that missile to fly. And again, these programmings, these detucts, as I described, would come to the uh, DV aircraft every day, and we'd reprogram them into the airplane, so the airplane now is ready to go fly these missions. So this happened weekly and daily for months
Wow.
until again we got the targets kind of narrowed down of what we really wanted inside the air campaign, which that's somebody else designing all that. That's General Chuck Horn and his team. And
So how much input does a captain at the time do they have in this whole process? I mean, do you get to say like, okay, I know this aircraft and I can, or is this all planned at like you said, planned at SAC, and they're like, hey, this is you're flying this route at this time for this leg, and then you're making this turn at this heading. How much input do you guys have at the time frame?
at this period of time during the bomber culture, hardly any input.
Interesting.
Yeah, most of it came from SAC headquarters. Now, when we're flying later in Desert Storm and conventional missions, again, you get and long range strike is so difficult.
Yeah.
You can't just decide I'm going to fly across the country without diplomatic clearance.
Yeah, that also makes sense, right? Like if you know, based on the gravity of this mission and the sensitivity at the time, I would imagine you're right. You're like, this is going straight approval from the president, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, hey, we'll get 8 captains to figure this thing out, right? And kind of
Yeah,
send it.
and since this mission really is recognized as kind of setting the bar for long range strike or how we even do it today. So Midnight Hammer back in June, that's 7 B-2 bombers,
Mhm.
7 B-52 bombers, doing air refueling through the Med into, I mean, the profiles are very close to the same
Yeah.
for a reason, because they look back at the legacy and heritage of what we did during Secret Squirrel and, why recreate the wheel. So, so back to your question, no, there's not a lot of captains making their own decisions and routing and so forth, because you've got pre-planned tankers at a certain place in time. You have to be there at a time at a certain altitude. Uh, you get to choose what airspeed you want to fly to get you there, and how but you still are going to fly a pre-planned route.
I love that. It speaks to the gravity of the mission and how big this is, because my experience really just comes from like super ground level where I'm like a staff sergeant, right? I'm like, okay, cool. I'm planning this route up that hill. But I'm not talking about integrating all of these other aspects of not just, and you go into detail in the book, not just, Air Force aviation and Air Force units, but also having to be able to disguise yourself as you guys are flying across, right? The link ups, it is absolutely fascinating to see. The holidays hit my body hard this year. A lot of travel, good food, and late nights. Basically controlled chaos. And I've noticed that as I get older, that chaos sticks around longer. Stiff mornings, slower recovery, and just feeling a little bit more beat up than I used to. So January for me isn't about some dramatic reset. It's about getting back into rhythm, and honestly helping my body recover the right way. That's where Bubs Naturals comes in. Here's something most people don't realize. Your body starts producing less collagen as early as your mid-20s. Collagen is the connective tissue. It supports your joints, skin, hair, nails, and recovery. When it drops, you feel it. Bubs collagen peptides help restore collagen levels closer to what your body had when it was younger. Since I've been using it, my joints feel better, recovery's cleaner, and overall I just feel more put together. Not chasing youth, just functioning the way I'm supposed to. It's also stupid simple. 1 scoop in my morning coffee. No taste, no grit, no weird aftertaste. Just part of the routine. And what really matters to me is why the company exists. Bubs is built in honor of Glenn Doherty, a Navy SEAL who gave his life saving Americans in Benghazi. That commitment to service and self-improvement is baked into their brand. They donate 10% of all profits to charity, starting with the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. On top of that, no fillers, no sugar, third-party tested, NSF certified for sport, Whole30 approved. This company is doing it the right way. If you want to live better longer, Bubs is giving our listeners 20% off. Head to bubsnaturals.com and use code COMBAT at checkout. And after your order, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please tell them Combat Story sent you. It directly supports the show and helps us keep these conversations going. And now, back to our show. So, all right. So let's take this to the moment before you guys are sitting in the ready room, right? And you guys are kind of going through your final briefings, and January 15th is coming. What is the feeling? You guys know that you're probably a part of this, and if January 15th comes and goes, you're in. So take me through that, especially with the other guys in the unit.
Yeah. So as a precaution, we knew the 15th deadline was coming, but our leadership had not gotten a lot of intel exactly when the president wanted really to start the war. So we are the crews are formed and we are sequestered to base on the 14th. So we're postured that if the president wants to go sometime on the 15th, we can respond immediately. We know that, that since we have to fly 15 hours to the AOR, we also know that we're in the opening hours of the air campaign. We don't know exactly where we fit, but we know we're somewhere in the opening hours. We know really we are the thing launching Desert Storm. Again, because all that time it takes you to get there.
By the way, can we just sit on that for a minute, right? Like we are the thing that is starting Desert Storm. That's not something that a lot of people have the ability to say, and I think that's pretty cool. To be quite honest.
And that's why I picked those words. And I've had a couple of people push back on, "Oh, you weren't the first ones to shoot in anger." Like, no, but every mission starts somewhere.
Yeah.
And again, it took us all those hours to get there. So technically, we took off and we launched. We were the first thing that launched in support of Desert Storm.
My gosh.
So back to your question, AJ. So we are. We're sequestered on the 14th, thinking something's going to happen on the 15th. That's the deadline. Why not? And we're postured to wake up early in the morning, thinking we're going to be woke up on the 15th, and the 15th comes and goes, and nothing happens. So, like you've probably experienced in your military career, there's many times that you are, generated. You're ready to go, only to stand down.
Hurry up and wait.
So we're kind of in that mode of now, like, oh man, there's probably going to be some kind of Let me back up. That makes it sound like I'm disappointed, but you're geared up, you're energized to go do your job, and when that day comes, you begin thinking, "Up, this is going to be a diplomatic solution," and that's kind of where we were. But nevertheless, the evening of the 15th. I talk about it in the book. Our commander brings in the JAG to do wills.
That sat heavy when I read that.
Yeah.
That sat heavy.
It did, and it sat pretty heavy with a lot of us because we're looking at each other, realizing this. On one hand, we weren't executed on the deadline, but at the other hand, our leadership is getting us prepared for could be the worst day of our lives in our
Very much so.
lives.
Well, if I may, culturally at the time, we weren't at war, right? This wasn't something. So we were going from, peacetime deterrence through overmatching firepower. And then, most of the world wasn't really paying attention to, I'm sure as Saddam did his thing, but within a period of like 3 to 4 months, all of a sudden, this starts taking very center stage. And so, if a young man or woman joins, the military in 2011, the country's been at war for 7, 8 years at that time frame, so they're kind of accustomed to the culture and but this is like a transition. This is a chapter turning, in American history. So that the gravity of that, especially when you're signing your wills and going through that process, that is pretty heavy.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I call it the Vietnam hangover. It had been 20 years since Vietnam had ended at this point. And Americans also, I call it the hangover because we didn't end that war on a good note. So there's a lot of that feeling going on. It is, and you talked about it, firepower. We felt like we had a technological advantage. We felt like we had this gigantic coalition of the willing with the 47 other partner nations. but you don't know until you're there. You don't know how well your training is, your readiness, the weaponry that your country is designed for. You just don't know. Now, what was needed for us is we knew we were carrying at this time the most advanced weapon ever designed. Designed in secret, no countermeasure. So that was kind of our pride, our saving grace to understand that we are going into combat with the most advanced weapon that ever man ever knew at this time.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So take me through 0300 in the morning and being woken up.
So again, we go to sleep the evening of the 15th, the energy level is now drawn. Yep, there's got to be something going on. I mentioned in the book, people are playing basketball till late in the evening. I'm sort of roaming the halls looking for just something to do, and finally go to bed pretty late. And a lot of us did go to bed pretty late, and I bring that up a lot through the book because um, we really hadn't slept in 2 days before 0300 on the 16th. And that's when and also keep in mind, this facility is packed with 9 crews that are there on nuclear alert, which is already at capacity, and then now they bring 7 more crews and just find places for us to sleep and lodge.
I'll bet the smell must have been something.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So anyway, here we are, and I'm actually it's a closet, it really is. They put a cot in there. And, but I'm happy with my cot in my closet, and yeah, 0300, um, some young airman, 18, 19 years old, with a flashlight in his hand is shaking me and saying, "Captain Morris, it's time to go fly." And you can imagine I've only been asleep for maybe 3 to 4 hours at this point, and then the night before, only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep, so pretty tired. And I'm in a place where there's no, interphone. Now the rest of the facility where everybody is, they're all woke up with interphone blare.
Oh,
3 crews, report to the briefing room. So everybody in the building is woke up, even the nuclear crews and the Secret Squirrel crew. I'm in a different part that, is where our tanker alert force resides in really their mobile home trailers, double wide trailers.
okay. Wow.
Anyway, so, um, briefing 0330 was what time we were supposed to be in the briefing room, and just like you see in a lot of the war movies, you might have seen, Masters of the Air,
Yeah.
a lot of that. That's what it looked like.
My goodness. And
And,
so you guys sit in there 0330. You have 7, is it 7 crews, right? So 7
y
crews. What was the tension like? That's what because I know when I'm trying to equate this to moments that I've had, but
yeah,
again, not the gravity. Like, so for me, my combat was a lot of chance
mhm,
contact. We're going out, and then all of a sudden, like, stuff starts going kind of crazy. We expected it at some level, but all of a sudden you were the offensive force, right? So you picked the time and the place, which is
yeah.
very rare in military history. What was the tension like?
So again, you don't know when you're awakened like that this is still the real thing. I mean, it could have just been, update briefing. Granted, 0300 in the morning is a little bit.
Been odd time for that, yeah.
Well, I mean, you still don't know for sure. So when we walk in there, and typical military, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. So we're all walking in about 25 after, and the question blended with the low level tension. The question meaning, is this real? All went away when I looked over, and on the front row, there's General Buck Schuler sitting in the front row with his very casual, like it's just another day. He has this, even at this time in his adulthood, his hair's already turned gray. He's not an old man yet, but now it's all wispy and it's just sticking up everywhere.
It's also 3 in the morning.
Right? And he's got a flight suit on, and he's sitting in the front row with his legs crossed, his kind of arm draped across the chair next to him, and then you knew this is real. So just like you see in the movies, we're all lined up from Doom 3-1 back to Doom 3-7 in crew lineup, pilot, co-pilot, what we call the radar navigator, he's really considered the bombardier, navigator, EW, electronic warfare officer, the gunner. We had gunners at the time, and then we had a couple. We were augmented with an extra radar navigator, an extra bombardier, and an extra pilot. So they were all sitting there somewhere around with us because this theater is only set for a 6-man crew. So, and then 0330 briefings on, just like you see in the movies with the the weather and the intelligence briefing and the kind of the sortie overview. You got these things that you're holding. It's all your data. It's inside this folder that has different slots in it for each crew member. So the pilot's passing that down to everybody. EDubs, here's your stuff. Navigator, here's your package. And you take this package of stuff that has all the things that are appropriate for your job, and it says top secret across the front of it. And you're kind of following along with the brief, just like we train that way.
Yes, sir.
So now you're following just like you've probably experienced, AJ, even though this is the real deal for the first time in combat, you're like, man, this is just like we trained.
Yeah, good thing, right? Yeah, it's not new.
But when you're in training, you kind of go through and you're told to go, you're training like you're going to fight, but it never really registers with you, never really sets in your heart, in your gut until you're doing it for the first time. When you walk out the door with your weapon and this is the first time you've got real ammo in there, right?
Of
And
note, I do love the fact that you guys carried a 38 revolvers. I was dying when I read that part.
oh, it's almost embarrassing to put that in there, but that's what it's terrible. Is it, they've been in the bluings kind of rubbed off on them. They just, yeah,
Well, that speaks to the Vietnam hangover, right? And
yeah,
you're seeing this crossing of
uh-huh,
almost two different tides coming, or two different currents coming together, right?
yeah,
A world that wasn't necessarily prepared for it, and all of a sudden, a world that was or
mhm,
had to be.
What I miss is, I miss a lot of things about my service, but one of the things that I miss the most, and you didn't, and I didn't really think of it until you described it, was sitting in a room where a mission is about to happen and everybody is on, right? And they're giving this brief. Somebody's going through the intelligence summary, weather reports, enemy strength and disposition, and you're sitting there going, I'm like, and every single person in that room is lockstep, full paying attention, ready to execute this collective mission. I have never felt more alive than moments like that when I know I have this entire team of people who all feel the same way that I do.
absolutely, yeah. And you hit the nail on the head with that. It's a whole different energy, a whole different level of attention and camaraderie and fighting for freedom at that point. I mean, all the things you can throw in there that may sound cliche, but it's there.
Well, and I totally get that. Your mindset of not wanting to, not chomping at the bit to drop the bombs, but chomping at the bit to do your job, to do the thing that you have spent, years perfecting and honing and getting to this point. It's really hard to describe to people who haven't been in those scenarios. The desire to want to be able to fulfill what you feel at that time is your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the whole time period that we're there is all capped off with the General Schuler. He was a 3-star general. He's been briefed into this program from the very beginning when it happened. It began a couple of years earlier. He understands the criticality of the mission itself, where it fits in the air campaign, the success of this top secret unacknowledged weapon, and then really how it will ultimately change how we use bombers.
Mm.
And it has. I mean, here we are 3 plus decades later. If you recall, when I was a kid, the way the United States projected power was with aircraft carriers. You always hear about the USS Enterprise carrier group is steaming to whatever conflict, and that would sometimes take weeks to get it there.
Right.
I mean, you look at what we've done even the last 12 months. What is the primary tool, military tool that projects power? It's bombers.
It's fight tonight. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's some really good writing in this book. And for the audience, we'll take us through. So I think that they all know now. You get the call. Yeah, you guys are sitting in there, and I'm loving this action-packed sequence. And if I may, read a portion of the book back
Oh,
to the
please.
author. It's one of my favorite things to do, um, and I love this. When the throttles were pushed to nearly 100%, you could feel it in your soul. The 488,000-pound behemoth defied the laws of physics, clawing at the air as it tore down the runway. Every fiber of its design worked against the relentless pull of gravity, racing toward the end of the 11,758 feet of concrete like a heavyweight fighter throwing a haymaker. Tell me what that's like when this thing is like, when you throttle pushed, like especially on this mission. Tell me what that's like.
So the B-52, this is a G model, by the way, which are no longer in service. And the little trickery that I describe in Doom 3-4 is runways were not long enough during this time period, and engine thrust also was not great enough to really meet the requirements of the payloads, meaning the weaponry and how much fuel you have to carry. So for the G model, they do this little. We would do this little trickery with the engine where if you inject water into the engine, it not only cools the water, but it thickens cools the air, but it thickens the air, which then immediately creates more thrust out of those engines. So an engine that's sitting at 100% is already doing everything I described in there, and it is. It's heavy metal it's heavy metal band loud inside there. I
Like
mean,
turn it up to 11, right?
this knob goes to 11, yes. It is that loud, and if you think about it, where the wings connect to the fuselage, which obviously has the engines on those wings, they're right there connected where I sit. So just a few micro inches of steel are these engines. So the thrust and the noise and even you even get a little bit of the exhaust seeping into the air. So it's coming into the jet a little bit. So you smell we used JP4 at the time, which is basically just smells like a really bad diesel engine. So a little bit of that's coming into the cockpit. So all your senses are just assaulted. Again, you feel the rumble. So you have touch feel, and then the sound and the smell, and it's dark. And where I sit, you're looking backwards, so it isn't like you can go look out the front for again another visual reference. So that's really what it's like. It is it's scary to me.
Does
Yeah.
it throw you back in your seat, or is it a gradual? Because, like, again, the runways aren't long as you described, and you have to put water into these engines to be able to make them, more dense and turn this thing up to 11. Is it like a roller coaster ride where, like, your
Or-
brakes are on, or
Yeah. So you start off again with 100% military power on the engines. Start rolling down the runway. Again, you're so heavy, you're not picking up speed that quickly, but you are, of course. And as we see that that the engine instruments all show that the engines are operating correctly, we see that we're getting normal acceleration. It's literally just a little bitty toggle switch that turns on the water. And well, for me, since I'm sitting backwards, I'm getting thrown this. So you get the first kind of throw from the initial engines coming up. Pilots are talking about the engines, the navigators are talking about the airspeed, and then the pilot will say, "Okay, water," and then the other pilot clicks on the water, and then you get a little bit more of a throw, and you kind of adjust yourself back in your ejection seat, preparing because also if you lose water at a certain time during this, which you can, it's happened before during this takeoff, now you're not going to have enough thrust to take off. So again, Yeah, it's a Hail Mary all the way. Keep in mind we're maxed out on the weight. If you combine the fuel and the weapons, this is what we call a maximum load takeoff. So if you lose an engine, you lose water. If you lose an engine, you are 7 engine capable for takeoff. We plan it so that if you do lose an engine while you're still on the runway, you still can. But if you lose water, you don't have enough thrust. That's the whole reason why we're using the water.
And so then you lift off. You know,
Yeah.
you leave a little bit of your soul behind because you're like flying so
Like
fast.
that. Yeah, you do.
And then so now you take off. My favorite portion of any flight is that moment of weightlessness, right? As you like take off and you feel it, and you're like, and then you leave Earth for
Right.
that moment. But now you're leaving Earth for a very, very difficult, arduous journey ahead. Take me through those next steps as you guys are now getting up. You're kind of stacking almost and kind of getting into your flight pattern. Can you take me through those next steps?
Yeah, so Doom 3-1, 3-2, and 3-3 all took off together about 10 minutes ahead of us, ahead of Doom 3-4. So they're gone. All that's left behind them is a lot of NASCAR level smoke. So we have a sort of a temperature inversion this day. So there's a low cloud deck, a lot of fog. It's drizzly. Temperature is I think is in the late 30s, the high 30s. I mean, so the weather's not that great, but again, there's a lot of just leftover smoke over the airfield, and we're waiting for. So they go off and they fly about 10 minutes ahead of us. And you can imagine if you take 7 aircraft and you try to fly them all together, it really becomes an airspace management nightmare. So the way we flew this mission is here I am with my hands, right?
I don't blame you. It just happens naturally. I get it.
The first 3 aircraft flying off on the mission on their own, and here at Doom 3, 4, and 3-5 are together waiting our turn. So as we're airborne, a little bit of radio chatter, not much, because again we're trying to do the best we can to fly in secret. We get just a few minutes airborne. Water's already run out, so we're already running on normal thrust, and that's when number 5 fails for Doom 3-4. The failure light, it's dark, or it's still in the cockpit. It's dark. The sun's just barely kind of coming above the horizon, but it's still dark. So this, the failure light quickly just illuminates the entire cockpit. Bernie Morgan, Steve Bass flying in the pilot and the co-pilot seat. Michael Branch is in the lawn chair. We talk about that, and so they quickly realize that it's drained out all the oil. Oil pressure 0. Failure light, the engine is indicating it's about to fail. So they quickly extinguish the engine by pulling back the number 5 throttle to idle and then off. So the engine now is just windmilling.
And how long into the flight is this?
4 or 5 minutes.
Shoot.
At the same time, the navigation computer self-powers down.
Oh, that's fun.
So now we realize here we are. Now also keep in mind the mission is only planned for 33 hours. We say it's a 35-hour mission, and there's reasons why it happened. That's more of the problems that we encounter later on in the mission. So here we are. We know we got a 33-hour mission ahead. We've already lost pretty much our thrust margin for the entire mission. We're down an engine, and then also we realize we don't know why, but we got a degraded navigation computer. We don't know why it rebooted, but we know we've got 33 hours ahead, and we have to keep a close eye on everything because the margin's gone.
I actually like that phrase, the margin's gone, because I know that you guys have 8 engines, which is fantastic, because that's just awesome to have 8 engines of that size and that power. But like you said, this is such a complex mission and for so long, and really the first of its kind, that I'm sure that you guys have a planning factor of margin of error through there. And 4 minutes into the flight, that's now off the table.
Yeah. So any time where we need to make up, or any portion of the mission where we have to make up time with more thrust, more speed, we can't. I mean, Anytime if we get behind, we're done. We can't
Y
complete the mission.
Right, fall behind, get left behind at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and so now how do you communicate this to your higher command?
Well, we're still running through the normal routine just to get airborne. So there's a lot of, aviate, navigate, communicate.
Okay, I've never heard that term, I like that.
So that's a common term, I think, in all aviation, even civilian aviation. When you're dealing with the problem, don't forget you got to fly the airplane first, then navigate the airplane, and then communicate outside. Aviate, navigate, communicate. So we're still in the throes of all of that. We've still got Doom 3.5 following us. We have a responsibility to the aircraft behind us. In normal formation flying, lead leads, number two follows.
Okay.
So a lot of that just normal when your training's kicking in, you're doing all those things that the team downstairs where the navigation team sits, they're doing what they can to get the system back up. The pilots really are having to take over navigation while still communicating to air traffic control and ensuring Doom 3.5 is tucked in behind us. So there's a lot of just flying the airplane right now. So once we are assigned to a cruising altitude and we climb that altitude and things settle down and we know that we're able at this point to sustain speed for the timing to get us really the next timing is the thing that we need is to
Mhm.
be at air refueling on time, which is still like 7 hours away. So with a lot of makeup time.
The scale of this mission
Yeah.
just blows me away.
Yeah, it's funny in the book, you've noticed, I'm sure, that I'm talking about night and day, quite a bit and,
Yeah.
what time zone we're local time we're flying in, but what's our body time zone on at this point? More than that. So, we finally get to the cruising altitude, and here we are, we open up a discussion. Um, while the aircraft commander typically gets 51% of the vote somebody's gotta be the boss. Bernie, the aircraft commander at this point, really starts soliciting votes. And while he doesn't say it, he's really looking for unanimous vote. So we talk through it and we decide if we say something too early to the mission commander, who's Lieutenant Colonel Jay Beard flying in the lead aircraft, he has the power to tell us to go home. Now we also know that the mission, as you do all the pre-planning, the pre-calculations, we know that you can fly the entire mission on 7 engines. Again, as long as you're on time and you're not falling behind, being left behind. I like the way you said that earlier.
Right. But your fudge factor is gone.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
We also know that the way planners designed the way our missiles were going to fly to these critical targets, and there's 6 targets: command and control facilities and power distribution nodes and some communication nodes. We know that they purposely overlap them with missiles across the 7 jets.
Okay.
Meaning, if we were to drop out, there still was enough firepower to destroy these 6 critical targets.
So a
Again,
little bit of redundancy.
yeah, a little bit of redundancy built in. So that's still in the back of our mind that the mission will not fail, but it'll be tremendously degraded if we move home. We also understand where we fit in the air campaign, that there's a lot happened in really like the opening hour or two. Then there was this pause, and that's where we came in, kind of giving the Iraqis a moment to, like we did many times with the Al Qaeda. Let's give them a chance to raise their heads a little bit. Right? Remember that, and then bring in more firepower, and also everything we did, everything we were selected to destroy was deep into Iraq, out of the range of any other capability, and it was designed basically to blind the Iraqis, is reduce their ability to manage and lead their forces, and well, I'll leave it at that. Really, that's what it was. Everything was designed to either reduce or eliminate their ability to lead their forces.
And so at this time, so you guys have lost an engine. You are not limping by a sense of imagination, but you guys are, your fudge factor's gone, right? But you're still in American airspace, and you still have to navigate what I found super interesting was the level of classification that this thing had was that you couldn't even communicate to air traffic controllers the true nature of your mission because it was so secret along the route. And
Right.
so you're able to navigate that through the, up through the eastern seaboard of the United States. What was that process like? Like, did it help? I would feel pretty cool, people like, so, you're giving, not false numbers, but you're giving the very, I would say grayish, call signs, I think, to people, nominal,
Um, yeah, I think that was a pride kind of feeling, that here we are, we're on this top secret mission, and we're getting kind of this special treatment, if you will, and I talk about in the book that every air traffic control center had a trusted agent, and you've seen pictures of how these look. I mean, there's a lot of controllers in these rooms with their radar scope and they really have a portion of the sky of their so Dallas Fort Worth Center is full of these controllers, and again, they have segments of that gigantic airspace. So we had to the trusted agent is already sitting kind of close to the person that's controlling the airspace where our route goes through.
it's gonna cut through, right? Okay.
Right. Well, he's kind of there to tell them, hey, don't care what you think you see. This is what you really see.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Just like that. And so yeah, that's how it worked. And it wasn't a perfect system by any means, and it's the best you had at the time. We didn't have FlightAware at that time that you people can dial in and look at your IFF and know where you're coming and going. So we still had our IFF on, which is identification friend or foe. It's a 4-digit code that you put in the special radio in the airplane, and the controller can see that code on his screen. He's not really tracking you via radar like you would think. He's tracking you via these 4-digit codes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now they can use backup radar to help track you, but they typically are not ever using radar like in the purest sense like you would think. They're not doing that. They're tracking this IFF system.
See, I just think this is so cool. Like, I've been on missions before, middle of the night, some random place on a map, and I like look over at one of my teammates and I go, "He looks so cool right now," right? Like, I get to be a GI Joe. Like I finally did.
And you do Oh, yeah, and I talk about in the book about how Bernie and Steve were about to take the runway. And it gets super loud even when the engines are just idling, and they yell across cockpit, "Boy, we're going to war!"
Right? There's always this sense of just, I don't know. There's like still like a 10-year-old boy. At the end of the day, we're just 10-year-old kids who are trying to live out our lives' little fantasies.
So we didn't tell anybody until we about our engine out until we were pretty far out over the Atlantic Ocean
Oh
at
yeah.
that point. And, we were queried by Colonel Beard a couple times, and we sort of pushed back with, "Hey, we're looking at something," and let more time travel by, let more proof travel by that we were well in hand, that we were keeping up, we were gonna make our AR on time, all that. And so when we finally fessed up, he just said, "Roger," and that was it.
I the tension in that portion of the book, I was like, I don't know. We could always, armchair this whole thing, but I totally get what you guys did. We're like, let's not tell him right now. There's some comm issues going on that we have to kind of navigate through. We'll let that take precedence for a minute. And then, like you said, like proof, like again, I think that, obviously that was the right call because if you were to said 5 minutes in that you guys burned an engine, that would have been a very easy, like, okay, go ahead and, turn around, land
Yeah,
back.
TB.
RTB, man, right? But you're right. That's actually a very smart way to look at it. Is we proved competence through that of saying like, hey, we've already made it through this much of the journey with no issues. We can continue through that.
Yeah, yeah.
So take me through your first gas stop on this. Now, a little plug is my mom was a or it what was at the time was a fine artist, and so she went and got her fine arts degree, and her first job out of college was in Silicon Valley working for a company called Singer Link. And Singer Link, part of their mission set was designing flight simulators. And so she was an artist helping with rendering, and this is in the 80s, late 80s timeframe, of designing the KC-130 aerial refueling portion of the of both from fixed wing aircraft and rotor wing aircraft at the
Oh,
time.
okay.
So you may have sat in some of the simulators that my mom helped, design at that time frame.
So yeah, that's fascinating because you're all going back to pre-digital age,
Yeah,
and you had to do the artist renderings of that stuff. So
that's
it's
exactly correct.
KC-135, by the way, not KC-130, but
Oh,
135.
excuse me.
Yeah.
My mom would correct me on that too. She's
Oh,
like,
okay, VGA.
yeah, exactly. Damn grunt.
At this point, we are now at a portion where the sun is about to set. We've got this little sliver of light shining behind us. So it's kind of, if you can imagine it, it's coming across the horizon in such a way that when you look down, it's pitch black. There's no light really emanating into the ocean below you, and you look up, it's pitch black. So it's like this fine beam of light cutting across. And we're meeting these 14 KC-135s that are flying out of Lajes Air Force Base, which is right there off the west and south coast of Portugal.
Yeah, rough duty station sounds like the
Oh, yeah.
Azores. Yeah.
In the Azores there. So 14 coming up. And by the way, they're not briefed into what they're about to see. All they know is they are supporting aircraft coming from the CONUS into theater. And that's kind of the way a lot of air refueling works is you don't really know at any given time, all the time, what you're about to refuel. Sometimes, most of the time, sometimes you do, but there are many times you don't.
Hmm.
All you're told is be at this point in sky at this time, this altitude, and your receiver needs this much fuel. So there's 4 pieces of data.
Yeah.
And so from our perspective, a trust perspective, you can imagine it's in reverse. We're trusting that they're going to be there at this place and time, at this altitude, and they're going to give us this much fuel because we know we need that much fuel to get to the next air refueling.
Yeah. Otherwise, you start falling out of the sky.
Absolutely, and that's the problem with long range strike, or the risk in long range strike is you don't have the ability like you do when you're flying a fighter over a landmass. If one of those 4 things goes wrong, you don't have the ability to just go land somewhere. You're now out of over in black open ocean, cold water. I love let me divert it just for a moment. I love this scene in the end of the movie Martian with Matt Damon.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. At the end of that movie, he talks about how you need to just accept that problems are going to happen. You can either accept it or you can not accept it and die. He said that, and this happens in long range strike, that you just accept it. You look at the problem, you work the problem, and you solve the problem, and you go on. And he goes, what's going to happen is you're going to have another problem.
Mm-hmm.
You work it, and you work it, and you're going to have another problem. And he said the trick is if you solve enough of these problems, one right after the other, you earn the right to come home. And when I first heard that, I thought, man, that is so much what this 35-hour mission was. Because here we were, 4 or 5 minutes into the mission, we lose an engine.
Huh.
And we calmly just aviate, navigate, communicate, get to altitude, deal with it. Or, we deal with it to a point, get cruising, get the navigation computer back. So here we are with the air refueling, same thing. As we're coming up to air refueling, we've already had engine out, navigation computer, the crypto radio didn't work like it was supposed to. Lead also lost their radio. Luckily for Rick Holt, he fixed it, earned his call sign MacGyver in flight. So we've had all these problems already, and we hadn't hardly even got into the first quarter part of the mission yet.
Golly.
Right. And so here we are with refueling. And many of us had never air refueled at night at this level of stress, where it's a bear to air refuel what we call heavyweight air refueling, because you rarely practice it. And the reason you don't is because it's silly to load a tanker up with maximum amount of fuel and go out and practice that a whole lot, because there's just a lot of risk involved with that for no real reason. Plus, when you get aircraft that are full of fuel, B-52 can't dump fuel, you have to burn it. So you get an airplane that's full of gas, you're in the air now for 15 hours
Oh
for
gosh.
no real reason,
Oh
just
gosh.
to fly around.
Just cutting squares.
So there's a lot of that's just a few reasons why we don't practice it a whole lot. It's just not practical.
Makes sense.
So here we are at night, heavyweight air refueling, and oh, by the way, we're doing it with radio out by design. We don't want to talk on the radios. It's what we call MCOM4, and all that trust that I mentioned earlier. And you're doing and you have to air refuel from 2 different jets to get enough fuel. So every B-52 has 2 KC-135s flying in front of them. So we start off with the first one, and pretty much goes uneventful for us. And I'm pointing over here again. I'm pointing again, like you know. We got our Doom 35 brothers over here at about our 4 o'clock, and you can look out the window and you can kind of see them over there about 1.5 miles, 2 miles off, with just a few lights shining, because we're trying to do this without. We don't want any airliners flying around us and noticing us doing this secret air refueling. And we do our first tanker uneventful. We back out, we go to number 2. Bernie's doing the air refueling and Steve Bass is monitoring. And we decided we're going to do that for the entire mission. Let Bernie always do the air refueling and Steve is there as the backup. Steve's noticing Bernie's struggling a little bit on the second air refueling. He's having trouble staying on the boom. And if you've ever seen this, you have to go find a video of a B-52 air refueling, but it's just immediate action, adjusting the whole time. And it's a wrestling match. Well, Bernie's raised the level of it's like MMA wrestling for him at this point. And again, it's dark. Cockpit lights are turned down low. The navigators downstairs are also keeping their lights low, because you want good night vision, right?
So if I may,
Yeah.
I'm looking at pictures of this, and this is it defies comprehension that this is something that we can do.
Yeah.
But this is also, I'm thinking at the time. So how do you see this arm, coming out? You don't have night vision at the time, right? That's not.
There are really dim, what we call indicator lights or position lights, that are on the belly of the jet, and then also on the boom, and then our air refueling receptacle that's on the top of the airplane has a little ambient light for the boom operator to see. So he has his target. He or she has his target of where he's going to plug the boom in. And again, it's a telescoping rigid boom. It's not a flexible. It has no flexibility to it all other than the telescoping part of it.
And you're fully loaded, so the aircraft is not as responsive, I would imagine, as it normally is.
Pretty light at the beginning, but as you're bringing on fuel, heavier and heavier and heavier.
I didn't even think of that. I didn't even think of that.
So that's why it's a little bit easier with the first tanker. Second tanker, we're getting hit.
Oh, okay.
Well, at a moment's notice, a split second, the sky just lights up when we look over at Doom 35, and there's a rotating beacon light lit up, and all kinds of other lights that come on and indicating what they call emergency separation. Tanker's climbing away at a rapid speed. The bomber's nose is tipped over. What happened was, without anybody noticing, that the tankers are flying 25 knots slower than planned. Doom 35 comes out of the darkness to begin their second refueling, exactly expecting a certain airspeed, only to find out that the tanker's flying 25 knots, and that explains why Bernie's over here wrestling his ass off, because they're flying too slow.
Oh my
we
God.
need the extra airspeed because we're so heavy. So there's one of our first major death-defying human error problems through this mission, where we almost had a mid-air collision with Doom 35 and one of their tankers, and we didn't understand why we're not going to get all of our fuel. Steve Bass immediately responds, breaks radio silence. Tanker Bomber 2, fly 275, and directs them. And that's when they realize. So what happens with a lot of navigators, especially during air refueling, is they forget that there's a contract. There's an airspeed contract. Got to fly that airspeed. They forget that, and they start adjusting their airspeed to make the next point on what they consider to be on time,
Oh gosh.
right? So they slow down because they realize they need to be at this next point on time because Azores is behind them. They don't want to fly too far from Azores, or they're not going to have enough fuel to get back.
That
So
makes
see,
sense.
there's all these competing priorities that led them to decide to fly a lower airspeed rather than the contract, which
Wow. I didn't even like this is stuff that just never even crossed my mind.
yeah, and I try to describe that in the book, and
Yeah.
I'm actually giving you more detail that was in the book because it's a cumbersome and difficult thing, but that's what happened, and again, it almost caused a midair collision between Doom 35, and we almost didn't get all of our fuel because we kept almost falling off of the boom.
So with the emergency breakaway, so Doom 35 off your 4 o'clock. Now you got me talking with my hands. So so Doom 35, right, is off your 4 o'clock. They have emergency breakaway. Did they re-engage
Yeah,
on that?
they're able to terminate it really quicker than you normally would for reasons to get them their fuel. They were able to rejoin. We got up to the contract airspeed, which solved all the problems.
So I have a question that's like more of a human thing. I drive in Southern California on the freeways, and if somebody like cuts me off, like there's a human thing, or somebody like someone's being an aggressive driver unnecessarily, I'm like, "Okay," like, how do you
Yeah.
get over that emotion of like these guys were, like, and just like clock back into like let's reset and try not to kill each other again
I
as we go
really
through this.
and I think you probably have the same culture from your service. You have to have a culture of accountability, quick accountability, receive the feedback, and move on. I'm sure that so we bring that into the culture from the very day we enter the Air Force, and I'm sure you guys do it inside you call them platoons, I think, right?
Correct, correct.
When you guys either go out on a training maneuver or real world mission, when you come back, you have a feedback session,
Yeah.
right?
We call it a hot wash.
Yep, hot wash. Same here, and we have it. We call it the debrief.
Yep.
Yeah, culture of debriefing or hot washing is built in the very day that you're in basic training, and then when you also get to your operational unit, it's even reinforced. And I'm sure you have we have a checklist that drives. We need to talk about these things, and usually somebody runs the debrief or the hot wash, but rank is left at the door.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like, hey, this was supposed to happen this way. This didn't happen this way. How do we learn from it? Right.
There's been many times people look at me and said, "Trey, you fucked that up," or "Trey, you messed it up."
I got you.
Or me telling somebody else, "Hey, we could have done that better."
Right. Yeah. They're sitting like Susie sad face in the corner, and you're like, well, sorry.
And I feel like that is an organizational component that we lack out in corporate world right now.
Mm.
That we don't set an early expectation or an early culture when you have people coming in and out of your organization that says, "Hey, we're going to have weekly debriefs, whatever it is." I worked for 12 years in the telecom industry. In this period, I was a reservist, but worked for Alltel in another company called Verizon. You may have heard of it. Yeah, and but you could see it when you didn't create an organizational culture with your team that says, "Hey, we're going to debrief and feedback, and it's going to be honest, and it may not feel comfortable, but we're going to do it anyway." And oh, by the way, when it's over, it's over.
Thank you. I have been so frustrated with that at times because people have said like, people are kind of scared of you. And I'm like, me? Right. I'm like, or you're kind of harsh. I'm not harsh. It's just what happened. Right. Like it's a difficult, like, I don't take it personally. I'm not throwing a personal jab at you. this is just the thing you said you were going to do. You didn't.
Y-
How do we get to make it better next time?
Absolutely. And you just hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could talk at length about that
We
for sure.
we could. And so I talk a lot about that when I do a lot of keynote speaking
Yeah.
is talk about just professional and personal expertise in your job first. 'Cause that pushes back a lot of things that, that inner voice that tells you when you compare and your inner critic, some people might call it, all the way down to just running great organizations and great teams and all the things in between. Yeah, I won't go into those now, but anyway.
Okay, so you guys grab gas. I actually cool. You called them toads. Um, so is that like a term of endearment, or is that just or is that like a, KC-135 to B-52 kind of like jab, or is that just what they're called?
I'll be honest, I don't know if that's still a common term out in the Air Force today, but when I was serving in the Cold War era, yeah, that was even in their culture, even in their tribe, they call themselves tanker toads.
Tanker toads. Yeah, we
Yep.
called the CH-46, which is the smaller variant of the CH-47. We called them frogs because on the front, if you look at them from the front, they look like Kermit the Frog. They have
Yeah.
like a little smile to them, so everyone called them frogs.
Huh. Didn't
There's
know.
also an acronym associated to that. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it was not a pleasant acronym.
Much like the buff.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. I love that. So, okay, so you guys get gas once, right? And now what actually I really enjoyed through that was, can you explain a little bit more? So you guys get gas once, and then it seems like well, that seems like you do get gas the second time, but then you have is it a KC-135 that is almost dragging you into the airspace? Can you talk about how it was when you were starting to enter into, enemy territory or
Yeah.
less than friendly territory? What Explain the background behind some of that.
So yeah, by this time we were now have flown through the Mediterranean. We've already kind of uh, had made contact with the Soviets, made contact with the Libyans, and we've already the plan was as we crossed through Egypt, even though we had diplomatic clearance, at this time in relations with the U.S., Egyptians still were a little bit of a wild card. So it was decided that we would allow a KC-10 that flies routinely through that area, coming in and out of the Med and doing their normal job, been doing it for years, that they would fly with us for um, credibility on the radio,
Yeah.
and some smoothness on the radio, um, and really just kind of I don't wanna use the word confidence builder for us because that's not correct, but really a confidence builder for the air traffic controllers. If they hear KC-10 talking like he always does, emitting signals like they always do, then there'd be less chance of them realizing this is a strike force coming through their country.
I really love that. That was so it kind of speaks again to the kind of cloak and dagger nature of the
It
mission, the secrecy of everything, of having a very loud cover, right?
the
Coming through here saying, "Hey, all is normal, nothing is new
one
here. Don't
one
worry about
thing here.
us." Yeah, nothing. Again, these are not the droids you're looking for, right? So you have a couple of chance encounters with a couple of other aircraft. Can you take me through that?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we missed as a country or even as planners that parts of certain parts of the air war would have already started by the time we got there. So there would be this mass exodus of what do those countries do with the commercial air traffic flying in around there at that point? And maybe we thought through that and downplayed it, diminished the effects of it. It was the number one danger right there. It was the massive amounts of commercial air traffic coming out against our flow. We were against their flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians, not really knowing we were a strike force, trying to send us into holding patterns or even have us land at places and, just trying to get us out of the way. And at this point, we really can't say, "Oh, but wait, we're a strike force for part of the war effort."
Yeah,
We
we'll
can't.
be out of here in a minute.
We are. But we'd already been told, "Hey, look, if worse comes to worse, you just don't talk to them anymore and keep flying." It's easy for somebody on the ground to say because what you just mentioned, chance encounters. The surface-to-air missile batteries that the Egyptians had were manned and autonomously manned, if you will, by forces that didn't that they were given uh, clearance if they felt like they needed to fire on what they felt was an enemy combatant. They're cleared to do it without any kind of coordination with leadership. So that's kind of over here on this shoulder, and then secondary we have um, phantom, if you will, or fighters coming up that we don't know who they are. They're not talking to us. They're not really emitting, but we see them flying off of our wing on about half of our formation. So, so we've got this churn of air traffic controllers trying to put us in a different place. The surface to air missiles, the SA-2s and SA-3s, which were the frontline Soviet systems of the day, tracking us, not firing on us, but illuminating us with their missile guidance signals. And then these phantom ghost-like fighter aircraft that are flying off of our wings as we're trying to get through this country.
What I found, and I think that maybe this was solved a little bit later on in this mission set, but you didn't have any other support, right? You know, you didn't have a fighter support. All these damn fighters, you know, right, making sure people know, right? But they're like, where the heck are you? You know, I'm sure that would have tipped their hand or tipped your hand a little bit more. But my gosh, the vulnerability that you guys had as a, you know, 7 and now 8 aircraft, you know, flight moving in, but not having any other, you know, ways to help deter that.
And that's the story again of long range strike. Because here you are, really, we use this term alone and unafraid.
Hmm.
Um,
Of which would be appropriate.
yeah, and especially for the Egyptian airspaces, here's 7 to 8, kind of the KC-10 flying coming in from the Mediterranean, wanting to cross over their country and then exit out the other side. So it isn't. It's problematic.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much so. So now you guys are eventually able to cross through. I did have a point of pride, and I will, since this is my podcast. There was an F-18 that showed up at some point from the naval service, if I'm not mistaken.
So now that we're over in crossing over the Red Sea, here again, now we have the Navy Strike Force, the Carrier Strike Force. I don't know which one it was,
Mhm.
but um, it's all part of the coordination and the planning. As we are, remember the IFF thing I mentioned earlier, where there's certain code that we have to dial into that, so the Navy understands that we are friendly combatant. But nevertheless, they still sent an F-18 up to at least look at us. Because again, we're trying to fly through here and pretend we're KC-10s. So we're not emitting, we're not giving out um, B-52 type signals. We're just trying to stay quiet and mind our own business. Right.
And so off to your 4 o'clock, or I think it was 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so how close was that F-18 when he popped up?
According to Bernie and Steve, again, I could see some of the signals that are associated with the F-18 on my electronic warfare equipment. But according to Bernie and Steve, they were, within a few hundred feet.
Okay, so was this daylight at this time, or was this
At this
still night?
point, the sun is about to come up, so there's probably a little bit of a sliver on the horizon. But I'm pretty sure at this point during the mission, yeah, it's still dark.
I just I just think of that when I was reading through that portion. I thought of the F-18 when I was thinking. Well, when I was reading through that portion of the book, I just imagined what it would be like to be that F-18 pilot, and then because we don't know what it is, we scramble. He probably gets off a carrier somewhere, and all of a sudden he rises up, and then he looks over and he goes, "No, we're good. We're good." These Americans, right?
Good.
They're doing something right now.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man.
And at this point, we're broken up into the KC-10 and the first 3 B-52s, and we're off kind of in a little separate formation of Doom 3-4 with the other three jets stacked up behind us.
And now, are you guys flying? And I know that you talk about it a little bit later on, but are you guys flying in a specific formation? Are you guys ducks in a row? God, I'm chasing my watch. Why is this constantly?
Yeah. No, it's visual-minded people.
Yeah,
You're
it just
pretty much
happens.
you're pretty much ducks in a row, but we stack up 500 feet, so we stay out of each other's wake turbulence.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
'Cause
I mean, yeah.
one right after the other. I mean, it's just the whole time you're just
No,
yeah.
we'll be using your vomit bag if you were doing that.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
yeah, you would be.
so
Well,
now take me through. So you guys cross into enemy airspace.
yeah.
Take me through that journey. I'm excited.
So here we are, it's still dark. We're coming out into, Saudi Arabia. We've have a pre-planned point where we'll descend down to about 8,000 feet. Uh, so at this point, we're sitting up around 28,000 feet. We've kind of already gone through the whole kerfluffle with Egypt. Um, and you remember what I mentioned earlier about these are still really test weapons. They're not fully integrated the way you really want them into the aircraft. So this is a point where we have to power down the navigation in the weapon computer, put in those detucks. Remember I talked about earlier, the mission tapes, put those in and reboot the system back up. There's a certain amount of risk involved because like any old aircraft, any old computer, is it going to boot back up
You
like it's
turn it off. Is it going to turn back on? Right.
exactly? And these detucks have this special uh, information that will talk to the missiles, and there'll be a lot of things that are manually done by by the navigation team downstairs, radar navigator, that they have to do a lot of manual inputs into their keyboards that they practice over and over and over because now this is a time sensitive situation. If you screw something up, and again, it's so clumsy at this point, and as you're going through this one to end process, if you mess up B, you got to start over again.
Oy.
Mess up, you know, L or Z, got to start. So these guys have practiced and practiced this over the months and the weeks and months previous to be able to do this in their sleep. So they're bringing up the system, reprogramming the system, and getting the missiles ready to prosecute here in the next hour or so. Doom 3-1 through 3-3, they go off into their own launch box. Doom 3-4 through 3-7, we're leading the second group. We fly off to our launch box. So it's pretty uneventful at this point. The sun is now starting to kind of creep up a little bit. We're flying out over the desert sand. It's again, since it's January, it's not really super hot. It's not turbulent. It's pretty smooth for the most part flying. And so we're just making our way to these launch boxes. Navigating the three navigators. Remember, I mentioned we have an augmented navigator. They're down there really doing their best to bring these missiles up because they've been powered down the entire flight. Get them, make sure they're programmed, all the things that they have to do, all the procedures that they have to accomplish to be ready to launch in the next few minutes. And that's where we almost have mission failure again. My gunner starts noticing that Doom 3-6 is no longer in formation. He's kind of moving out a little bit. And one of the top directives that we were given, because this is something that's never been done before. We've never launched these cruise missiles in a formation. They've just been launched in tests one at a time at a target. So nobody really knows exactly how they could or could not perform. We think they're just going to drop off a wing, wings pop out, engine lights, it'll fly a little bit, and then it'll make a left-hand turn off to Iraq. So the directive was you have to stay in a stream formation, in an elephant walk. Doom 3-4, 3-5, 3-6, and 3-7. Stay in a perfect line. Because we don't know if these missiles could do something unusual and crash into an airplane.
Right.
Here's Doom 3-6 moving out of formation. And our gunner sees it. He's telling the pilots what's happening. Pretty soon we see him. He sees him starting to pass Doom 3-5. Nobody's talking on the radio. Our radio's silent. Everybody is focused on, we're within minutes of getting ready to start launching these missiles.
God.
Pretty soon he passes Doom 3-5. And our gunner can see him because it's a rear facing radar. He sees him on his little radar scope. And it wasn't long after that, you could look at it at 4 o'clock and there he is. And Steve, sitting in the co-pilot seat, Steve Bass, at this point can't take it any longer. And he gets on the radio. And this comes back to credibility and take feedback. Sometimes don't question the feedback. Just take it and do what's being directed towards you. Now, this was a super experienced crew. So that's why I really don't, some people are not saying anything. When he's passing, when he passed Doom 3-5, they didn't say anything. And here he is off our wing. Still nobody has said anything to these guys. So
Because since they're so experienced, we're what, right? What's going, yeah, right. We assume that they're working through something.
Yep. So Steve can't take it anymore. And he just like, and he can, we already know it's Doom 3-6. So he comes on the radio and directs him. Doom 3-6, get back in position, check your timing. Well, what happened was, remember I said we had to reboot the navigation computers. So this is a time period. Now in today's world, we enjoy just about every electronic device we have, whether you're infantrymen on the ground or you're in the air, you get a GPS time hack.
Mm-hmm.
Turn that thing on, it talks to GPS and it syncs immediately. Don't forget, this is pre-GPS days. This is the day of, there's no fly-by-wire in a B-52. There isn't any of that.
Right.
You look at your watch and you plug the time in.
Oh, wow. I've done with radios, we've done that, but we've been a couple more than our classified, number of seconds that we're off, and you're not talking. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they got to have the synchronization on the crypto.
Right.
Well, what happened was when the navigator rebooted the computer, he put the time in 1 minute off. And so in his mind, we're 1 minute late. And
he's throttled down.
So, but what could have happened is we're rolling into almost seconds before launch. And if they had launched those weapons, they would have flown into us.
Oh my gosh.
So luckily they got back into formation within just a couple seconds before weapons start. The computer commands the weapons release, right? So he's able to get into formation, weapons release. And man, so again, none of us had ever launched a cruise missile before. And this thing weighs a little over 3,000 pounds.
Whoa.
And it's pushed away from the jet with charges about the size of shotgun shells. So you can, because it wants to push it off of the jet so the wings can fold out and the engine ignite. So you can imagine the shudder on the jet when these things go off. And again, immediately losing 3,000 pounds. And I talk about it in the book, how it scared me. It startled me.
Right. I think you were walking or something like that, or
Yes. It's air smooth. I wasn't really sitting in my seat at this point. I could walk around the airplane and I could still look over my shoulder at my equipment for any threat signals. I was experienced enough that I could, from where I was standing, I could immediately tell, oh, there's something coming up. But so I kept an eye on it. But then I went up and I wanted to see if we could maybe see these missiles fly off the enemy territory. You couldn't, but
all this time and I don't even get the payoff of watching the thing leave the rails.
It just violently shook the airplane. And so we went through the launch sequence that happened every time when a weapon went off the aircraft. And we were one of the unlucky few, Doom 3-4, that had to retain weapons that didn't leave the rails.
Is there a term? I could only imagine. So when I read that portion, I think it was 1 or 2, if I'm not mistaken, that had some sort of malfunctions too, right? Yeah, they had some sort of malfunction. Knowing my culture, if that happened, even though it wasn't my fault or wouldn't have been your fault because it was a computer thing, I'm sure I was assuming that there was some sort of like jabbing when you guys got back to base. You'd be like, well, yeah, at least we
be jabbing and questioning. And
would you forget to fire the other 2?
Did you miss the ON OFF button?
I like that.
Yeah.
So you guys release, how am I allowed to ask how many you had, weapon systems that you had, on? Um, so
You
how many
mean how
how
many
many
how many missiles did we bring
yeah.
back?
No,
Yeah.
how many Calcums you had on board?
So across the 7 jets, we had 39 on board, and we only launched 35.
Okay.
So Doom 3-4 brought back 2 missiles, and I'd have to go I don't even remember the date
Oh,
on
sure.
the other 2.
So within minutes, the launch systems have now launched 35 Calcums, right? So GPS guided cruise missiles that are able to hit within inches of their designated target in the
Yep.
opening salvos of Operation Desert Storm.
Yep, missiles flying just under the speed of sound. They're just barely subsonic. Um, quite a few 100-mile range. I mean, it's astounding that they fly pretty darn fast, that far, and can still hit the target with that kind of accuracy, even back then.
The absolute math behind everything just kind of, blows me. As a math guy, the math just kind of blows me away when it looks at that. So
Yeah,
now you guys have released on your aircraft, you had 7?
yeah,
Okay, so you released 5 of those things. You've now crossed through your window,
yeah.
of where your launch is. So now enters what, I'm glad you captured this, and I think you captured it very well. Now enters what I think is the most dangerous portion of the mission, is when
It
you're
really,
returned to base.
in hindsight, it really was. I mean, the first part can still speak for itself, and it's way up there on the danger scale and,
Yeah.
the problem solving scale. Yeah, the return portion really was the hard part.
Yeah. We call
Uh,
it smelling. I mean, I'm from California, so I don't know the term super I mean, I get the term, but I didn't live the term, but smelling the barn, is when guys are patrolling and we get closer back to base,
mhm.
or closer back to friendly lines is when we start making mistakes. We start letting our guard down, the mission is over, and so we work very hard to instill that, like, the mission's not over until you're debriefing with a cup of coffee in your hand, right, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and that is exactly what happens in the Air Force, especially and I keep kind of foot stomping the whole concept of long range strike. I mean, we've flown 15 hours. We did what we came there to do, and you're right. It should be so easy to turn around and go, "Phew, man,
We're good.
we're good," only to find out there is a whole lot of mission left.
Right. So now
A
you
lot.
guys have to now your exit route, did you effectively kind of take a turn and then move out, or did you just continue on a different pathway? Like, how do you guys get out of the, weapon engagement zones of potential adversaries?
So again, now keep in mind we're over Saudi Arabia. We're never really when we're doing the Lord's work, if you will. We're never
Mhm.
really in enemy territory.
Which is fantastic for the standoff that
Yeah.
you guys have, which is it speaks to the volumes of this capability of long range strike is we can get close, but we don't have to like threaten this entire thing. I think it's just absolutely astounding again.
Now for us, the enemy's everything else.
Mhm.
So
Well said.
interestingly, we did, as we turned around and reverse routing, we did spend a handful of minutes exhaling, just flying over the desert. By this time, the sun's kind of just barely above the horizon. Flying's fun for a moment. It's not the air is still kind of smooth. It's not turbulent at all. We've already done what we really came here for. So there was a handful of minutes that we did exhale before we like, all right, we got to get back home. And it was reverse routing. I mean, we flew back up to altitude, said hi to the Navy again. We picked up that KC-10 that was there waiting for us. Luckily, flying through Egypt wasn't that big a deal this time.
Okay, great. Uneventful.
Yeah, we're going with the flow. We're uneventful. We don't care if they know who we are at this point. Um, the real problem happened when we got over the Med, and we're realizing that the headwinds that we expected to be 90 knots were already like at 130, 140 knots.
Which changes your fuel calculation,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely tremendous.
especially with 7 out of 8 engines.
Yep. And carrying for us 2 missiles and 2 of the other airplanes
I
carrying.
didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
It's an extra 6,000 pounds
Yeah. Yeah.
and the drag associated with them.
Because these are out on the wings.
Yeah.
Um, most of the time in today's world, cruise missiles are carried internally
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
B-52H model, but this
Oh,
time
cool.
they're still out there on the wings. So we're starting to see these additive things coming towards us, these additive complexities and factors coming at us. The headwinds are rising 90 knots, 130, 150, 160 knots in the face. And not just temporary. This goes on for hours. As we turn west, looking for the how things look out ahead of us for that third air refueling, the KC-10s coming out of Italy. We realize that the rendezvous point is just covered in major thunderstorms. So here's now is this clairvoyance has to come into play along with trust.
Yes.
So you have to be in guessing how we maneuver around these thunderstorms. Is that where do we think that KC-10 is going to be?
Mm,
Now radio silence is pretty much out the window at this point, but
okay.
with the weather system in place, UHF radio and even VHF radio doesn't really stand a chance of anything distance wise to be able to find this tanker.
Especially with electromagnetic storms, right?
Yep. Yep. So here we are. We're fighting. We're fighting winds. We're fighting thunderstorms. We're still adhering to our safety measures as much as we can to fly around those thunderstorms, but we're having to kind of eke into the margins a little bit, and we're going to guess on where this tanker is. And oh, by the way, if you recall, we didn't talk about it a whole lot, but the secondary fueling was right around Crete. So we went from that secondary fueling all the way, launched our weapons. So you can imagine the margin was tight, even on a good day.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I didn't even think about the proximity, right, from where you guys ended up.
That's a
So yeah,
lot of flying with only one air refueling, and you're going to come back and get the tanker pretty much in the same proximity. It's a
so
lot
you
of
start
flying.
moving into no fail territory.
Absolutely. And now we've got the headwinds, and now we're having to maneuver, extra maneuvering for the thunderstorms, and we're carrying those two extra missiles. But so we are down to basically around 25, and we measure fuel in pounds, by the way. So all of our gauges measures that in pounds. So we're down to about 30,000, 40,000 pounds of fuel. And oh, by the way, B-52 has about a 20,000 pound measuring error in could be potentially. So you don't know if you've got 60 or 20, and we're burning about 20,000 pounds an hour.
Those
So we don't
numbers
have
are just staggering to me, by
right.
the way. Yeah.
So you can 20 divided by 6 is about 6 pounds a gallon. So we're carrying only got about 3,000 gallons left. Ish. Call it 4,000. We'll round up and say it's 4,000 gallons. But well, that's about how much we're burning an hour, and we're about 30 to 45 minutes from where we think the tanker might be. Hopefully, that's where it's going to be. So you can see all these factors are just compiling one on top of the other. We're too far away to give up and abort and go land somewhere in Italy. There's no place. There's no way. Even if we could find a place, there's nowhere to go.
So what's the internal conversation like? Is this again, are you open dialogue, or is this, like a couple of people talking intracoms,
Yeah,
or
we're by this time we are talking inside the airplane, and we are strapping in and preparing to eject if we need to. So there's conversation because I mean the pilots are sharing with us. So they're the only ones that can see the fuel state. So they're sharing with us about how much fuel that the gauges are telling them. They're looking for alternative plans. Is there another runway somewhere that we could get to? The nav team's helping out with that. So we're talking about all these backup plans, and not a single one of them really has any merit. And we come to the conclusion that we got to find the tanker. Now, Doom 3-1 and 3-2 and 3-3 ahead of us, they're figuring their own thing out, and we're with 3-4 and 3-5. We got 3-5 kind of around us somewhere, and 3-6 and 3-7 are back doing their own thing. So
Okay.
this is just Doom 3-4's story right here. We don't know where the other guys what they're doing. Because everybody's just kind of picking through this thunderstorm the best that they see how for them.
Okay.
And we're flying far enough apart that we don't have to like follow each other into their plan. We can come up with a plan. So I'm here. So like obviously we found that the tanker, we find the tanker um, with really only about 30 minutes to maybe an hour's worth of fuel left to fly.
So who takes over the flying into and being able to get the gas? Is it the same pilot you mentioned earlier? Does he get so now that he's a little lighter, is it a little easier, or is this like, oh man, I struggled on my last on my last tanker, or on the second of the KC-135s, right? Is that like running through his mind before he's coming back up to this?
It is only because we realized that if we take off just what was planned in conjunction with these new headwinds, we will not have enough fuel to get to the fourth day refueling. So he's realizing if the tanker has it, we got to take off. We got to take on as much fuel as we can get.
Okay.
So again, we're still in the clouds. Visibility is probably let down to a few hundred feet.
Oh
And
gosh.
so the radar navigator, uh, Scott Ladner, Haas Lander, Ladner, as we call him, Haas, he is directing us to the tanker with his radar. He's able to penetrate the weather enough at this point because we're kind of getting to the backside of these thunderstorms, and he's
Okay.
able to find the tanker on his radar and direct us towards it. And luck would have it, as we got closer enough, we're now ready to contact. Visibility improved, and we were able to connect with the tanker.
I mean, what a huge relief, right? Once that clicks in and you're like, hey, gas is flowing, right? You're like, "Oof," I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Well, phew. But again, we're like, as I mentioned, radio silence pretty much out the window at this point. Although the KC-10 has this really cool feature that once you connect with them, they have a comm channel that really connects through the air refueling boom. So you can have a private conversation between the two aircraft and not transmit radio signals.
Oh, I like that. That's pretty
Yeah.
smart, actually.
That's for that very reason. So we realized we need more fuel. And again, luck is on our side, and they have more fuel to give. And so we're taking on as much as we can, but getting back to we're dragging a couple of missiles, and we only have 7 engines. And so we get down to the point where we really are getting super heavy. Bernie's doing just fine for the most part, but we can't sustain enough airspeed to stay on the boom anymore. We keep falling off, or we're about to fall off.
Holy moly.
So there's this maneuver that's kind of folklore. We don't practice it, but you can well imagine. Physics says if I go into a descent, I must be able to go faster. So that's exactly what we did. We directed the KC-10 to start a shallow descent,
Like a nose down at like 5 degrees or something like that.
whatever we needed to gain enough airspeed so that we could stay on the boom and drink more fuel in.
Wow. Wow. I mean, again, the ingenuity, right? The problems, solve the next problem,
Solve the
solve the
next
next
prob
problem until you can, come home.
and get home. And so we accomplished that a few times. They call it a toboggan refueling procedure. You're like, just what it sounds like.
It makes sense.
And it gave us enough airspeed that we could stay on it and drink up some more fuel. Again, now we're super heavy. We're at what we call this emergency roar order, almost this level of weight that you really only do
In
it's really
emergencies.
designed, yeah, in emergencies. And we were like, well, we're at war and this is emergency, so we're allowed to do it. So by the time we were finished that KC-10, we were fat with fuel.
Just and fat and happy at that point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so now you guys have to eventually cross the Atlantic, or do you sip again before you cross the
We had
Atlantic?
one more air refueling, and that one it has its own peril because the tankers that we were supposed to air refuel with, the same ones at the beginning, coming out of the Azores, are grounded
Because of the storm?
because of the winds. Right?
Murphy is following you guys from the moment your wheels up all the way.
So anyway, we have a flight of KC-10s that come out of Spain and chase us down from behind. We've already passed Spain.
So they scramble these guys effectively.
Scramble them. That's right. They scramble them, and right now the war's on. So these KC-10s probably were tagged to do something else. but they scramble them, they divert them to get, because we have to get home. We're carrying, they, leadership does not want to explain these 4 cruise missiles hanging on wings if we were to land somewhere else.
Correct. It's an odd conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no equipment at somewhere else, specialized equipment to download them. If you want to take them off, you can't do it.
Correct. And then you can't maintain the classification of them because of the spaces of wherever you're at or the
Yep.
potential. There's so many. I completely understand that where they're like, hey, just get home.
Get home. So that's what they did. Is leadership figured out a way to find these KC-10s. They chased us down from behind. By this time, we realized one of our bombers is got a refueling problem. Doom 3-2. They can't take on enough fuel to get home. Doom 3-3. I think they lose an engine eventually. For us, our engine number 5 that was spinning is now seized.
Right. So
it's
then you
creating-
lose. Now you create drag, right?
So again, all these problems are just compounding on top of one after the other.
So I'm blown away by I think what this really helped. I mean, I understood. I worked inside of NATO and I worked in, the coalition forces, but this, I think your book really, really speaks to, and especially with the aerial refueling component, speaks to the level of continuity that we have as service members. Is that no matter what, I think it's our bond with one another, right? Is that the DC-10s, right, that are scrambling out of Spain to catch up to you, right, because they know that you can't make it home. I think that really speaks to the level of who we are and when we are really, really good and when we are really, really great is like our commitments to one another. I do remember seeing in Afghanistan, I remember seeing heavy bombers overhead. Every once in a while, they would cut overhead and you could see their jet streams or something like that. And I would just look up and be like, man, I know I am protected at this point, or they're going to make someone else's day a lot more miserable than mine. Um, and it was just, it's one of those moments. And I think your book really, really speaks to that. So take me through. You guys have now crossed the Atlantic, hopefully without much more, many more problems on the way. And then you guys come back home. Tell me what that's like coming back into into American airspace, and then
Oh, yeah.
eventually what it's like landing back on the tarmac.
So it's interesting, at this point, it's almost every man for himself situation. So the healthy airplanes that have already done all the fuel calculations and realize that they can get home with the amount of fuel they have and maybe go a little bit faster, they do. They kind of break out and say, okay, we'll see you all when we get there.
And the squadron commander is on Doom 3-1?
Yep.
And how's his aircraft doing?
His is actually okay, but Doom 3-2 and 3-3 are not doing well. They need
Okay.
more. They need more gas.
So the squadron commander's aircraft is like the primo aircraft, apparently, is what it looks like. Nothing goes wrong with it.
Well, pretty much, except the radio problem they had to
Sure.
fix.
Sure.
Well, 3-1 through 3-3 get an emergency air refueling that's coordinated through command, but they have to have the extra fuel. They're not going to make it home. They're going to have to land somewhere else. They at least could land in the United States, but again, how do you explain where'd you come from and why
Yeah.
are you getting here? So
Well, your
again,
pilots look so tired, right?
exactly. So there's these big bomb bursts. For us, we didn't need any more fuel, but the calculations forced us to really pull back the throttles and conserve what we call flight at best range speed. Plus, with number 5 engine out, what that affects on the airplane is your ability to brake and steer. So you don't want us landing somewhere in the middle of the stream and possibly closing the runway down, right? And then having people that are low on fuel, where do they go? So anyway, you can imagine we were purposely put more towards the end of the landing order. Doom 3-3, as I mentioned, also had number 5 engine that failed on them on the way home. So they also needed to be at the end, and they not only needed fuel, but they also needed to be at the end of the landing order.
The complexity
Uh-huh.
of this is so mind-boggling.
All that's being thought of and planned. Again, the healthy jets that had the fuel go get out
Yeah.
there and land.
It's
Get out.
almost like get out of the way, right?
Yeah.
You're right. It's not a bad thing. It's like, no, just get out of the way. You guys are good. We got other things, other problems to solve.
Yeah. And you need the problem children, if you will, at the end of right? And so the landing order is arranged, and again, we're sort of at the end by intention. We were not the last guys, but Doom 33 was the last ones, I believe. And since we had those missiles, it was decided that we were going to land and then taxi straight into a hangar, which is also not, you don't do. You get towed into a hangar. You don't actually taxi into the hangar.
Yikes.
Yeah. Uh, B-52 is big. You can do it, but we're accepting risk to do this. We're accepting. So, and that's exactly what we did. So we taxied into this hangar. Plus, when you get towed, that's like, after flying for 35 hours, that is 30, 45 minutes of just agony.
It's the traffic jam 5 miles from your house, right?
Exactly.
You're like, I'm right there. I can see
Yeah.
the exit. I can see the exit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be like for you going on a mission and being brought back in a Chinook, and then you taxi up, but then they won't let you get out.
100%. 100%. No, and you're sitting there and you're just sweating, right? And you're just like, and everything's done, and all you want to do is take this gear off, right? And like take a shower. 100%. So, okay, so then you guys make it into the hangar and you guys come off. Tell me what that's like. So, I mean, again, like this has got to be your guys' Super Bowl. You literally said the word Hail Mary before, right? Or the phrase Hail Mary, right? What's it like landing, powering down, coming off the aircraft?
Well, the first thing that really overrides everything at this point is fatigue. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we really didn't sleep the day before and the day before. So here we are, not only just fatigued from 35-hour mission, but also the 2 previous days we really didn't sleep. So there isn't a lot of this outward exuberance, if you will. But what was really memorable is when we pulled in there and the crew chief hooks up to the airplane with his interphone system, and just him saying, "Hey, welcome home, guys." I mean, simple words, but it kind of washed over you a little bit, and realizing, we just disappeared for a day and a half,
Right.
and here we
And
are
the
back.
kind of the gravity of everything.
Yeah,
Like the words "welcome home," right, are it's a short phrase, right? But I mean, as you wrote, right, the gravity of what they really, really meant.
yeah, and I talked about, I think, in the book also, the group photo.
It's on the
Uh,
back wall.
yeah, yeah,
Well, first of all, I love that photo. I also love, as a Marine, that there are pictures in this book. That helps us Marines out as we're going through this thing. But tell me through that photo.
So, what struck me at the beginning of this mission is here we knew this was going to be historical. We knew the length of it. We had kind of done a little bit of research and knew the length of it was going to be the longest combat mission in history before we even started. So we knew some of the significance of it. Obviously, with the top secrecy of it, the GPS, all these firsts. First time a combat mission has been flown from the United States to strike an enemy and back to the United States. That had never been done either. So it was weird to me personally that I even thought this to myself, even the Manhattan Project, which we know was one of the most secret military projects in the history of mankind, at least it had pictures. And here we were about to fly, and there wasn't a public affairs dude
Nope.
in like the briefing took any pictures. There was nobody. It was like we were coming out of this Vietnam era hangover, and nobody thought like that. That we need to record and document this.
Right.
So me and there was one other dude just illegally put a camera in her pocket, and that's where those pictures came from.
I
And the
won't
other
tell
guy,
anybody. I won't tell anybody.
well, no, it's okay now. And Russ Gathers was the other guy. He's a lieutenant on one of the other aircraft. He did the same thing. He put a camera in his pocket.
And you captured these. I mean, the photos that you have in here, one, you've done a very good job of describing the men in these photos. So there's obviously an emotional connection that I have as a reader going through that. But when I look at these photos, I don't know.
it's it's really touching that you have them because they're just they're just random,
Yeah.
regular Americans, right? Who have kind of come together, on this special mission to kind of work together. And the I don't know, I look at like the youthfulness of them, almost like this like kind of like innocence to it.
Oh yeah.
It's just really special. And like I love how, and again, we'll put these on there, but like everyone's just kind of careened around, like, hey, like leaning out, kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
just it just speaks to it. And then I really do appreciate that you have the pictures of the crewmen who have gone west. I think that's
Mm.
really touching.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that group photo, we've really kind of become the face of the mission because that's the only crew photo of the entire mission. And we got out, and we were about everybody was gathering their stuff, and you can see that all of our gear is sort of off to the side, and you can see the hatch. I think that I didn't crop it down too much. You can see the hatch is open off to the side. Like, hey, why don't we do it? And I think I was the one who said, hey, why don't we do a group photo real quick? And we all kind of just got together. And to this day, I don't know why everybody touched me on the shoulder. I thought that was kind of funny.
I
But
do think that's actually really nice. And
that's
well, it's also poetic,
yeah,
I think, to get a little sentimental. I think it's poetic that they're all touching your shoulder at that moment. And then, pictures that you have later on in the book is, you know, you addressing, at the 25th reunion.
yeah.
Um, and I just think it's really, really cool. With that, I've really enjoyed reading through this book. I've really enjoyed, having this conversation with you. As we start to kind of, wind the interview down, what I like to do is give the guest, the last word. And anything that they wanted to say to the world, anything that they wanted to say to people who have read the book or the crew members that you served with. But with that, before I shut up, what I'd like to do is the last time is thank you for coming on the show, Colonel U.S. Air Force retired Trey Morris, author of the book Doom 3-4, a firsthand account of the top secret mission that launched Operation Desert Storm. So with that, thank you, sir, so much for coming on the show, spending a couple hours with me just to be able to tell your story. And with that, please, the floor is yours.
Well, again, AJ, thank you. I mean, I have big respect for Combat Story and what you all do, your mission statement to allow veterans to come in and tell their stories. Incredible stories out there. I've got, another decade of these, even in my hip pocket. I spent quite a bit of time in post 9/11. You talked a little bit about that. So pretty much not night one, but close to it. I spent 20 some odd missions over Afghanistan and another 9 over Iraq. Um,
I may have looked up at you one of those times.
I have, and um, some pretty cool stories in that too. Maybe another book in me regarding that. This is one of my little certificates here, even flying over country.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, a lot to do, but really, this I tried to do my best to write this book. Not it was out of my eyes and from my eyes and from viewpoint of Doom 3-4, but really, I'm glad you picked up on that. It was trying to be a tribute to the entire mission, the crew members on Doom 3-4, and frankly, the reason it's not about everybody is because it was just too complex. I tried to pitch it that way, and it's just way too much to write about in a readable format. I had a great writing partner, Bonnie Peluso. You can see there on the title page on the inside. She was instrumental and many times helping me arrange my thoughts or maybe changing the color commentary to some different wording. Not a ghostwriter, but not an editor at the same time. She was in this perfect spot in between the two. I noticed Dark Horse, you had a writing partner also, and
Yeah.
invaluable to me to be able to have her with me and tell that story. So I wanted to say that, but yeah, a privilege to fly with the crew members of Doom 3-4. We've got a 35th reunion coming up, and we're going to do it in Dayton, Ohio, at Wright Patterson this June. So want to put a plug in for that, but again, appreciate kind of giving me some time to close this. Um, And it was a privilege to serve with these folks and to be able to serve the military for 31 years.
Yes, sir. So I have one final question for you
Yeah.
that I try to ask all of the guests it's a newer thing that we're kind of going through. Young lieutenant steps into the Air Force, looking to make a career of the Air Force, or someone who's looking to join the service and has yet to make that journey. What do you say to them?
Well, I touched on it earlier, and I think you've got to embrace this concept that you have to become an expert in your job first and foremost. Because what's happened is we want the platform, but we don't want the pain. And I've lived by that a lot right now as I talk through brand new airmen that you've got to do that first. Because what that does is it helps you understand that it push back on that inner critic. And also at the same time, it helps your teammates understand that you're credible, which then rolls into the trust part. So much of that. You mentioned in my book that I wasn't put on this crew, Bernie Morgan's crew, until like 3 or 4 days before the mission took place. Um, the person that I replaced, they decided they needed him on a different crew. So the electronic warfare officer that had been part of Bernie's crew for a long time, months, maybe years, was moved off and I was brought in. And why did I fit so well in there? Because I was good at my job. I'd already built a reputation of credibility, and I was able to roll into this crew with in a heartbeat, and it looked the same as it did before I even got there. So I would say that's huge for a brand new lieutenant or brand new infantryman or brand new soldier is get good at your job and accept the fact that it's going to take a little bit time to get good at your job. You're not going to have a lottery moment where you're going to get that platform overnight. You've got to endure the pain. You've got to endure the time it takes to get good at your job.
Well, I really, really appreciate that. And again, thank you so much, Colonel Trey Morris, United States Air Force retired, author of Doom 3-4. With that, when you write your next book, please, we'd love to have you on the show and interview about that. I can't wait to read number 2. And with that, thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.